And the Bible talks about those who love darkness. They hate the light. And what do they hate? They hate the fact that someone brought this moral revelation into this world. And who is that people? It happened to be Jews. On Mount Sinai, in a place, you can go there today. I believe the Bible is true. It is a blueprint of God for humanity. And if that's the blueprint of God for humanity, that means when he says, to your offspring, I will give this land as an everlasting covenant, I'm like, okay, that's what he says.
Hi friends, a quick bit of context before I share this week's interview. Last month in January 2026, my wife and I traveled to Israel for 7 days on a trip assembled by Dr. Yoram Hazony, founder of the National Conservatism or NatCon conference and author of The Virtue of Nationalism. The trip was organized by the Herzl Institute, of which Dr. Hazony is the president, and the Conservative Partnership Institute. My wife and I didn't travel alone. We were accompanied by accomplished and influential men and women from the United States and abroad, and I was honored to be numbered among them. Lately, certain influencers have framed these trips, which have been running for a couple years, as bribes, and I understand why the question lands. If someone paid for you to go, what do they want in return? Here's what I can tell you plainly. I wasn't asked to say anything, endorse anything, or conceal anything. I was invited to show up, pay attention, and ask questions, and then tell the truth about what I saw if I was willing. And I am. It's my position that if you believe something about a person and you wish to know the truth, you can ask them. If you believe something about history, you can read about it, preferably from primary source materials. And as a man who has traveled to more than 30 countries around the world, many while carrying only a small backpack, I believe that if you want to know something about a country, you visit it with your eyes and ears open. And that is the spirit behind the Conservative Study Group trip. It is an opportunity for nationalist conservatives from America to meet nationalist conservatives in Israel and see what we have in common. What is a nationalist conservative? In my own words, it is someone who holds to traditional socio-political and cultural values, often informed by a deep religious commitment, and who believes in the sovereignty and unique beauty of their own nation. I formed those beliefs during my years abroad, toward my own country, the United States of America. I have said before that overseas travel made me a raging conservative. I believe wholeheartedly that not every nation in the world needs to be like America, but the world needs a nation like America. And I honor the same instinct in any country, be it Japan, New Zealand, Peru, Mongolia, India, or Israel, because I have seen the wreckage of imperialist globalism firsthand as it devours local cultures and people groups, leaving behind deep poverty and tall piles of plastic. I've also seen the wretchedness of tribal corruption, which is what actually cripples hardworking people from producing the prosperity the West takes for granted. Again, I have seen these things with my own eyes. I've breathed the foul air, seen rivers and beaches choked with trash, and met people whose lives were shaped by forces they didn't choose and must fight against every day. I did all that while I was still a liberal and still believed in a politically unified humanity. But to paraphrase Irving Kristol, a conservative is just a liberal who was mugged by reality, and that describes me. I didn't grow up a conservative or a nationalist. Liberal politics, globalism, and tribalism made me one. Only years later, when I read The Virtue of Nationalism, did I realize that Dr. Hazony had put words to tensions I had already felt in my travels. So when the opportunity came to go to Israel for the study group trip with Dr. Hazony, I said yes. It was not a leisurely cruise. A lot was asked of us in terms of time and attention. It was more like a college class. And like any class, you only get as much out of it as you're willing to put in. The depth of your thoughtfulness, curiosity, and investigation will determine your results. We were told we could ask anything of anyone, and so I did, often uncomfortably so. I took my years of experience watching and listening to unfamiliar nations and compared what I was seeing to what I already knew to be true about my nation and the world. The answers I received changed me as a man, as an American, as a conservative, and especially as a Christian. I haven't said much about the trip yet, not because I have nothing to say, but because I have too much. I'm still processing, still digesting, and still need to get my photos off my SIM cards. But in the meantime, if you listen to my podcast, you'll know that instead of telling you things, I'd rather show you. Don't take my word for it. Read the books, talk to the people, go to the places. And so this podcast episode, Lord willing, will begin a series of conversations where I ask the people who know to share their wisdom, in the hopes of contributing to a conversation that is sliding quickly in one direction. We begin this week with Luke Moon, one of our guides on the study group trip. Luke helped us navigate the religious, cultural, and historical landscape between Christians, Jews, and Muslims, exploring the Jewish roots of Christianity, the violent tensions between faith communities, and the Christian story that encompasses them all. My intention is to give you access to the same information that I had without getting on a plane, because there might be no country in the world more important for Americans to understand today than Israel. It now dominates our politics on the left and on the right, and plays a central role in the Christian story as well, which is the story of God's redemption of humanity and the cosmos, the greatest story ever told. For that reason, I think it's worth all of us getting curious, asking deep questions, not being content with surface answers, and breaking out of our prejudices, assumptions, and fear with courage, discernment, and determination. Here is my conversation with Luke Moon. Hello, and welcome to the Will Spencer Podcast. This is a weekly interview show where I sit down and talk with authors, thought leaders, and influencers who help us understand our changing world. New episodes release every Friday. My guest this week is Luke Moon. Luke is a social entrepreneur running both nonprofit and for-profit entities focused on strengthening the biblical roots of Western civilization. For the last decade, Luke has focused his attention on raising awareness about persecuted Christians in the Middle East and encouraging Christian support for Israel and the Jewish people. For over 25 years, Luke has been a teacher, writer, and advocate on a variety of social, religious, and political issues. Before focusing on Israel and the Middle East, Luke served with Youth with a Mission, where he taught young adults how to study and teach the Bible, fought human trafficking, and led reconciliation initiatives around the world. Luke holds a bachelor's in biblical studies from University of the Nations and a master's in global politics from Regent University. He is also an ordained Southern Baptist minister. In addition to 2 weekly podcasts and a newsletter found under the brand Two Hammers, Luke's writing has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, The Tower, JNS, The Christian Post, The Federalist, The Forward, Juicy Ecumenism, the Washington Examiner, and Providence Magazine. Luke Moon, welcome to the Will Spencer Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Will.
Sorry, as I stumbled my way through your bio right there, it was
Okay.
you and I had the chance to spend a bit of time together. I guess it was about a month or so ago on the Israel study group trip, the conservative study group trip, which was amazing. And you and I talked a bit, but to read your bio helped provide a lot of context around the subjects that you're passionate about, the subjects you and I talked about. So it was actually very helpful for me to learn all this about you, because I'm not just going to sit down with you on a bus and be like, "Hey, so tell me your formal bio."
Yes. Well, it's regularly updated, but that's the latest version of it.
Mm-hmm. I think to start, I think that sort of gave a broad overview of your interest and experience, but I think I'd like to start by sort of giving your story about how you came to talk about Israel and the Jewish people, especially coming from being a Southern Baptist minister and your background, and also how it fits together with human trafficking. Maybe a little bit about the road that led you to be where you are today and the man that you are today.
Yeah, well, I think the road was totally accidental. If you had asked me in like 2009, Luke, what do you think about Israel and the Jews? I would have probably said nothing. I have no thought about that. I'm just a regular American guy. I was a missionary. I was doing work all over the world. I was fighting human trafficking, leading reconciliation initiatives, and in none of that was I thinking about, oh, I wonder what the Jews are up to. and then I started doing a lot of especially on the anti-trafficking work. There was a lot of awareness gathering and trying to show people that human trafficking is a real problem. And I found that, well, okay, now that everybody knows, what's next? And that got me into kind of the public policy space, and that led me to get a master's, because I wanted to actually do more kind of on the political side of the advocacy. And so, actors go to Hollywood and policy wonks go to D.C. So I ended up, moving to D.C., leaving the mission field, moving to D.C., felt like it was a call of the Lord. And while I was in D.C., I actually didn't end up doing anything related to human trafficking, which was a surprise to me at the time. But I did end up at an organization called the Institute on Religion and Democracy. And we were tracking a group that we called the Christian Left. And because, at the time, there was a lot of the kind of the divide within the church happening in, let's say, 2012 was over, abortion's always there, but the LGBT stuff was just like maximalist at that point. I mean, we were kind of, a bunch of states had adopted same-sex marriage, a bunch had not. Some were trying to stop it, others were embracing it, and so you end up with the Supreme Court case in 2014. But before then, I was leaving the mission field. The mission field, particularly that I was on, the focus was on winning people to Christ. And so it was very much, niceness was a major virtue. You try and mitigate the conflict and focus on the things that unite. It was often, the way I would describe it is, you're standing shoulder to shoulder instead of face to face. Right? Meaning like you're standing against, with the world before you, and you're trying to win them, and, the verses like, it's your kindness, Lord, that leads me to repentance, was those, those are there. I mean, it's there's a lot of kind of animosity towards like the winsome part of Christians, but it's like literally part of the New Testament is full of being winsome. And so when I got to the IRD, and one of the things I found was, I remember coming across this 40 days of prayer for abortion that was being pushed by this group out of California, as you might expect, of like Episcopalian and Methodist, pastors or priests or whatever. And I had no context for that because I just didn't have an understanding of self-identified Christians promoting things that were fundamentally unbiblical.
I don't understand
because
it either.
I just didn't know. I didn't know.
What are you praying for?
Well, it was literally things like, abortion's a good, that it was so weird. I got to pull it up one day and
Lord, abort more babies. Is that the prayer?
Yeah. It was like abort more babies. Abortion's a good.
That's horrifying. Actually,
praying for the doctors and the nurses that do abortions. It was that kind of stuff.
That's the most horrible thing I've heard all day. Thank you.
I know. So you got to understand that, like, so I'm coming out of like, I feel like a little bit like Mr. Magoo, who is like coming out of this, like, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. I'm just a good old church guy who's doing the evangelism and the human trafficking. Everybody's patting you on the back because you're doing the anti-trafficking stuff. And then I just hit this brick wall of like, what the heck? Like, I didn't know this like, when you're in the mission, you're arguing over like, the different schools of, do you focus more on helping and feeding people like the mercy ministries, or do you focus more on evangelism? And that was the big fight that we were having, right? Like the idea was both of us were trying to win souls though. So it was like, how do you do it better? Yeah. And so that was the debate. Whereas I come out and I'm like, wait, there's like 50 days of prayer for abortion. I didn't even know that there were Christians that supported abortion. And then I find out there's this, there in DC, there was a whole lobby for the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, RCRC. And it was a pro-abortion Christian lobby. Wow. Okay. And I was like, well, I don't sit around well. And it just lit a fire under me, and I burned through like, 500 Facebook friends in like a month because I was just lit on fire by this, enraged, and not knowing how to respond to it because, Matthew 18, you go to your brother and you do this, work its way up, and then, right, it's church discipline structure. But what happens when these people are promoting these things that are supposedly Christian publicly in a national platform? Like, so that was that. I just didn't know what to do with that. And so I turned, real fire and brimstone real fast, mostly just fire. And then, I really struggled for several months. I was like 6 months trying to figure out how do I articulate my passion and like how passionate I am about this without falling into just like or sin of any kind, like where I'm like vengeful, wrathful. I can't go to these people in a Matthew 18 sense because A, I don't have relationship, but B, I feel like they have to get responded to publicly. Like we're not in the Matthew 18 environment. We're in a different environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so that led me to, I calmed down and I kind of came to an understanding of my own self where I described what my kind of goal or mode was to call people back to the Bible. In a sense, that was what the Old Testament prophet's role was. It was less foretelling, telling the future or anything like that, and more just this like, people, read the Word, get back into the Word, get back into the Bible, read it, study it, you'll see it. And so I went kind of Old Testament prophet. That was my shtick. And so then I would go to their conferences because they were wild. They were just insane and funny in a weird way. But I also just love to talk to people who disagree with me. Like it's one of my favorite things in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like the most disagreeable person I can find. And if I get to have them grab a beer with me, I will be like, I'm like in heaven, because I just find those conversations so interesting and fascinating. And it's helpful for me to understand, okay, where's the actual line that I'm trying to move here at? We can think and speculate and create these like straw men about how we think the other side is, what's their position, how they're articulating things, what they actually think. And I would find really interesting conversations where I would say, I'd go to these festivals or conferences and I would say, we both want less poor people in the world. What we're arguing about is how we get there.
Mm-hmm.
And so by framing it in that way, it took the walls down quite quickly. And then people were really able to open up about what they thought and how they got to where they got. And so for me, it was doing that kind of work. And then a bunch of the guys I was tracking were going to this conference in Bethlehem. And it was an anti-Israel conference. And I thought, oh, well, if they're all going to Bethlehem for this conference, I should go too.
Mm-hmm.
And it was called Christ at the Checkpoint. And I convinced my boss that if I could raise the money, he would let me go to this conference. And I thought if I'm going to spend a week in the West Bank, I should spend a week in Israel proper.
Mm-hmm.
And so I raised the money. I convinced my boss to let me go, and I sent an email to everybody I knew. Like back in the day, you could send your entire email list and a message, and it not be caught up in spam. Mm-hmm. And I had 2 people respond saying and they introduced me to their friends. And so that I set up a coffee and a lunch. I rented a car. I just drove up and down the country. I had to look like an old school Samsung like one of those was the candy bar shaped phones,
Oh yeah.
And I just call people up and be like, hey, can we get together? And I asked a bunch of questions and tell me about your story. Tell me why you're here, all that sort of stuff. And I did the same thing on the Palestinian side. And I was sitting with a Palestinian peace activist and I said, what do you want? He said, oh, I want peace. Well, so's Miss America. That's not an answer. Everybody wants peace. Describe peace to me. And his picture of peace didn't have any Jews in it. And I was like, oh, well, that's not peace. And you got to understand, I had spent the last decade at that point on social justice issues. So I was you could have called me a social justice warrior because that was how I was. I mean, I really was. I mean, I fought the things that everybody was fighting. I did the things everybody was doing. And so I knew the language that whole side was coming from. And so I started push back within that language structure. And I realized we're not on the same page. There's so much asymmetry here and it's not over, it had so much to do with actually fundamental things like what is justice and how, and do the Palestinians have any agency? and because they demand justice, but it's from the position of feeling like you're only being acted upon and never acting, which is not true. Okay,
very leftist.
It's a very leftist framework. I mean, it's a victim villain framework, but it's only in one direction, right? And which a friend of mine actually says, like, I mean, it's actually one of the challenges of the whole conflict is that both sides use a victim villain framework, and so it's really impossible to move past that because you're never actually getting to some of the roots of the things, and you can't really talk about these things like justice effectively. And so that's 2012 was the first time I went to Israel, dude, and it like got under my skin. I remember it was cold. It was in March. It was cold and raining, and I was up on the Mount of Olives, and I thought I was going to the desert, so I thought it would be warm. It was not. And I remember like going back to my hotel at some point and calling my wife, and I was telling her, today I went up to the place where Jesus supposedly ascended into heaven. And my wife says, "What do you mean supposedly?" And I was like, "Yeah, what do I mean supposedly? No, I went to the place where Jesus ascended into heaven."
Yeah.
And it kind of blew my mind at that moment. I was like, "Wow, I'm in the place, man. That's," and it just hit me in a weird way. I didn't really do any touring. I just kind of walked around like a regular guy, just kind of checking stuff out and going where I thought, oh, that sounds, I'll go check that out. I'll go check that. That was me for a week and 2 weeks actually, because I was on both sides. But from that moment, I started to like write articles and kind of talk about this issue. Particularly because, contrary to what is articulated out there, most Christian organizations and leaders don't even want to talk about this issue. They don't want to talk about Israel,
the Israel-Palestine conflict.
Yeah, well, they just don't want to talk about Israel and Jews or anything. They don't want to talk about it, and to the point where, actually, it's the opposite. That most of us. So my kind of preeminent article, the one that kind of got me on the map, was one I wrote where I said the pillars of evangelicalism are anti-Israel, and I named World Vision, Willow Creek, and Willow Creek at the time ran a leadership summit that was perhaps the most well-respected. It was the mega church of mega churches. Willow Creek was one of the first mega churches, and Bill Hybels started this like leadership thing, and they would have, I mean, the church already held a ton of people, but they would have, Bono and the Dalai Lama come and speak, and Arthur Brooks, and like these big lip Clinton. Like, it was a really interesting leadership summit. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know that I'd have him speak to Christians.
I know. I
might go the other way, but yeah.
But nonetheless, that was my expectation or my thought, the way I, understood this whole thing. So Willow Creek was anti. Wheaton College, which is like the Harvard of Christianity, also totally anti-Israel, and Biblica, which was the authors of the NIV Bible. They had done they were constantly churning out study Bibles, and a bunch of them were just toxic waste dumps of anti-Israel garbage. I mean, just really, it was one that I remember. I don't. At some point I'll find it, because I think I still got it. But it was like one of those, like, would have this intro to the Bible before Genesis, so it's like for people who have never read the Bible, you open page 1 and you start reading stuff.
Yeah.
And it broke the Bible up into these like 7 sections. And the first, you have the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. And then you have Joshua through, maybe the Kings and Chronicles or something like that, right? This kind of the narrative continues, and then you have the wisdom, and it opens the little section on Joshua by saying, "And here the Israelites enter the land of Palestine." I'm like, No, they did not. They entered the land of Canaan. Actually, is what the Bible text actually says. But this book, it enters Palestine. What, like, come on.
Wow.
And so that kind of stuff got me going. I started writing about it in articles and speaking about it. Next thing you know, I'm doing full time. And that was 2014 is when I started doing this work full time. And
oh, wow.
Here's 11 and a half years. It'll be in September. It'll be 12.
Wow. So that's all very helpful for me. I listened to your interview with John Harris, and which I really enjoyed. And one of the things that was helpful for me, but also a little bit opaque, is I didn't grow up in the church. So there are lots of church movements, organizations, evangelical colleges whose names I know, and and individuals whose names I know or don't know. And that's a little bit kind of fuzzy to me. So to hear you sort of talk about your path through those worlds was really helpful to help turn the lights on, because I sort of arrived into the Reform world around 2021, 2022. And so I've been kind of figuring out, like, this is the last place in the universe that I ever expected to end up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm sort of reflecting on, like, what is a Reformed theology? If you had asked like 10 years ago, if you'd asked me, I don't know, what does that mean? And so, but sort of understanding the way that it localizes itself in the larger evangelical and Christian context, both, contemporary history and into ancient history. But it makes sense to me. Well, okay, here's a question then. So in addition to, you had the NIV and you had this anti-Israel kind of sentiment from Willow Creek and others, you also had this kind of dispensational left behind kind of strain, right? And so that seems like two paths. Like, did they know each other? Did they talk? Because it seems like they had different perspectives on a really central issue of Scripture and what it teaches.
Well, the interesting thing about so the Left Behind series was like a phenomenon, and
I heard about it
in the aughts, right? So it was we're dealing with like 2006 or so. Okay, so mid 2000s. Everybody read it. It was like the Harry Potter series of Christendom. Like, it just like was. I found them to be entertaining. I read them all, but I also found them to be a little annoying, because you would get to these parts where it would be like this guy telling the other person in the story the gospel, but it would happen multiple times in the book. So you'd be like, okay, I know that part. Skip ahead kind of thing, right? But it was. I have a friend who once said that the best and worst thing that ever happened to dispensationalism was Left Behind series, because nobody knew really. I mean, I grew up in the denomination that was the denomination of Darby, who is called the father of dispensationalism. And I asked my dad recently, like in the last year or so, I was like, do we happen to have a Schofield Bible? Because, one would think that if I was in the church that Darby started, that we would be like, charts all day long. We'd have the Schofield Bible like in the center, next to the Eucharist or something like that. And we didn't have a Schofield Bible. And I asked my dad, like, do you remember anybody talking about Israel or being really into Israel or whatever? He's like, no. And I was like, okay. So what is really interesting to me is that, like, it was a real movement. I mean, the dispensational movement was quite strong, particularly coming out of a couple of major movements within the church. So you had the like, one of the big issues within the church was the split over biblical inerrancy. Okay, this was a big major movement, because what it led to was actually the big splits in denominations. So you're Reformed, right? What kind of Reformed are you?
Presbyterian, CREC.
Okay, CREC. All right. So there's five before CREC. Okay, there's five major Presbyterian denominations, and you have the PCUSA, which is the most liberal. There was a group that broke off from them over homosexuality, and they started one that called ECO, the Evangelical Covenant Order. Then there was the Evangelical Presbyterian Church of America, which was a result of the split over women's ordination that happened. And then there's the PCA, which is kind of the most normal one that people know about on the conservative side. Then you have what's called the Orthodox Presbyterian Church of America.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then now you have CREC, okay?
Yeah. Which
I don't really understand what the acronym stands for, but I know when I see it,
Communion of
right?
Reformed Evangelical Churches.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's interesting to me is you have these splits that happen, but the splits happen after this big conference on biblical inerrancy, which happens in 76. It's a really like epic split within, let's call it like Christendom in America. It was quite serious. I mean, it split basically what were traditional mainline churches and created what you could almost call evangelical churches. You still don't have mega churches yet, but you have denominations that are splitting in half over things like women's ordination. Women's ordination was a big deal in the 70s.
Still is.
It is, but it's nothing like it was then.
Okay.
And then you had another major movement, which was also big, and it was what was called the charismatic renewal.
Mm-hmm.
Which was a lot of people who were in mainline churches would go to like Bible studies, and then like the Holy Spirit would fall, and they would start speaking in tongues, and people would lay hands on each other and be healed. And it was like the weirdest thing was happening, and that was happening all over the place. At the same time, you had these major West Coast denominations like Calvary Chapel, Vineyard, that were kind of coming on Foursquare, also out of California. All these denominations were kind of emerging and becoming very strong, and growing a lot. Okay, so you had these movements of within denominations that are splitting, and new things are being formed, and in the midst of that, you have the establishment of the state of Israel in 1948. You have what many saw as the miracle of 1967 of the 6-Day War. And then you have a book called Hal Lindsey called Late Great Planet Earth. And there was a lot of talk about, the end times. And the end times became a really popular topic of discussion through the 80s and 90s. I mean, I remember the videos that was like, there was guillotines, and there was like, there was a lot of talk in that direction. You had this book called 88 Reasons Why God is Coming Back in 1988. And it's not outrageous. I mean, we laugh about it now because it's obviously didn't happen.
Yeah.
But there's a big theme in the Bible about 40 years being a generation.
Okay.
So 1948 to 1988. So it was like, and it sold so many copies. That's just one example, right? So you had this theme was cooking along the way. Y2K, which was that like, all the computers in the world were going to shut down in the year 2000. That was everybody was freaking out about that. And then, a few years later, onto the stage burst the Left Behind series, which was like this unfolding of how all these things were going to happen. And the reaction to it was massive. I mean, it's the best and worst thing I ever had in the dispensationalism, because it's the best thing is like everybody read about it and knew about it. The worst thing was everybody reacted to it, and in mostly negative ways. As far as I can tell, I rarely meet to this day dispensationalists. I do. I mean, I know some now, but I would say most of the people that I hang out with will never tell me whether dispensational or not. We actually don't. I mean, I rarely talk about end times with anybody.
It doesn't come up, or they just reaction. It doesn't come up, or they won't cop to it.
Doesn't come up. It's not a big focus, not a big push. I think what you have is in this stream. Oh, nice. There you go.
My daughter just came in and brought me some coffee. So,
Oh, that's sweet.
Tamara
Nice.
says hello.
Oh, nice. Also nice.
Sorry.
So, so you have this. I remember I took to Israel in 2017. I brought the biggest, or I guess the most successful church planters in the SBC. I brought them to Israel in 2017. And I remember sitting around with them at dinner, and I asked them, when was the last time you taught out of the book of Revelation? And every one of them said, I don't.
Yeah, I believe that.
Okay. And that to me is the fruit of the reaction to the Left Behind series. So it wasn't that suddenly people were, they didn't replace talking about the end times with something. They just stopped talking about it. Okay. So it was a vacuum got created essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think so much of what we're seeing now, is the result of that vacuum that got created, because nobody's been talking about the book of Revelation for 20 years. And as a result, there's a whole generation that never there's a really interesting survey that says if your church is premillennial, which means that you think there's a literal 1,000 years coming into the future, that you will be your support for Israel is 4 times higher than anybody else. Okay. So end times matters in your perception of Israel. If you don't talk about it at all, it doesn't come up. Right. And so it's why, particularly among Reformed and what I call the apostolic churches, which is the Catholic and the Orthodox primarily, and some of the Anglicans, is you end up with this, because they don't talk about it. There's no, if you asked your average Catholic, so what's the Catholic view of the end times? They have no clue. They have no way. They have no idea how to answer that question. That's right. Because it's just not talked about.
Yeah.
And I think so you got to see the Left Behind series as this, in a sense, it's the kill shot to dispensationalism. And so when all these people are labeling, oh, Luke, you're just a dispy. A, I'm not a dispensationalist, but B, I have literally not heard a single sermon out of the book of Revelation past the first 3 chapters in 15 years. At a church I've attended.
Right.
Now I moved all over the country, so I've attended a lot of different churches. So maybe they did it before I got there, maybe they did it after, but
they're waiting for you to leave.
Have not heard it. And I also don't go to the kind of churches that I think that kind of thing comes out of. But it's a very interesting phenomenon to me. It's not it doesn't surprise me that we're in this moment, because we have the boomer pastors are retiring and they're giving it over to the Gen X and millennial pastors, their churches.
Yeah.
But the Gen X and millennial pastors have reacted already to the Left Behind series because they hit it when they were young, in their teens and 20s. So they stopped teaching it. They didn't replace it with anything. And so a void got created. But it's an interesting void, because the current rising worship songs coming out of places like Hillsong and Elevation, there's a new Elevation worship song that just dropped at the end of last month, and it's all out of the book of Revelation.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So what's interesting is it seems to be, it's on its way back, but I don't know who's teaching it. I don't know anybody. I still don't know who's teaching anything about the book of Revelation. It is a void. I mean, I'll tell you, I was talking to this guy on WhatsApp recently, and we got into a conversation about dispensationalism. And I said, who's the preeminent kind of dispensationalist scholars that I should be listening to? And he, I got a couple of names, but it was 2 names. Okay.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
But I said, but who's putting out like social on it? Like who's the big like dispensationalist social media person? Okay. The stuff I got sent to me was like, it was like clip art from the 90s, dude. It was like so bad. I was like, this is terrible. I mean, if this is like the tip of the spear over here on like the revival of dispensationalism, I'm like, yeah, that ain't coming back anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
And so all the people who are attacking supporters of Israel as being dispensationalists, to me, it's fundamentally an ignorance of actual zeitgeist around Christendom about end time stuff. I would say, and I've been pretty consistent about, I think I can, these numbers are pretty accurate. I think maximum 25% of Christendom in America, of like, let's say there's 100 million Christians in America, like real Christians, Christians that attend church at least once a month, max 25% would be in any church that supports like a dispensational orientation.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I'll just sort of lay my cards on the table here. No, that's great. That's all very helpful. Just from my own upbringing, like, that I grew up Jewish, and right. Even though we could not have been further away from, Christendom or Christianity, Christianity was still, the trends were a little bit like the noisy neighbor in the apartment complex. Like I still knew about them. You know what I mean? I think I still had some sort of like awareness through the 80s of like the Christians are really kind of obsessed with like this end times apocalyptic stuff. And then there was like the whole like jars of clay thing. And then there was the whole purity culture thing. And then there, of course, Left Behind. So I was still sort of environmentally aware of what was going on without knowing what any of it was or really caring. And so now, like, to hear all this stuff is actually really helpful as I can sort of pull out some of the data points from my own life to say, oh, that's what was going on in the apartment next door in a sense. But just quickly about the dispensational thing, about the objections to dispensationalism, I think what we're looking at society-wide in America, especially, I can't say whether it's true for Europe, but definitely in America, is just one giant Fifth Commandment violation party. I hate you, Dad. And that's what I think it is. It's like my dad, or not my dad personally, but like sort of, expressing the sentiment is like, Dad was absent, abusive, abdicating, weak, passive, whatever, and so, my dad supported Israel and he was a boomer and, he was, he believed in dispensationalism. And so anyone who I don't like immediately gets lumped in with my dad. And that's what I think is just kind of going on. I think it went on, and people who listen to my podcast know that I feel this way. So like it went on in the generation previously, it was more feminist in character. I think a lot of feminism can be identified in that regard. And I think now we're seeing a counter reaction in the other direction from men. And so it's not as if this charge of dispensationalism, as you're saying, has any substance behind it. It's just wanting to smear or slander anything that appears to be like, my father was. That's kind of what I think is going on.
You are 100% right. Like I can tell you, it's an actual fact that the biggest proponents against Israel among the Christians, leave aside like the Palestinian Christians, but just like the American anti-Zionist or anti-Israel Christians, like every single one of them grew up in either a dispensational home or one that was very, very charismatic, often Assemblies of God or something like that. I find that that's the case with lots of people. I find that there's this reaction, like the biggest people who embrace, cessationism, like where the Holy Spirit is not active anymore kind of thing. They all grew up in AOG churches or super charismatic Pentecostal churches. But the opposite is also true. Meaning, like, I know a bunch of people who grew up in either Catholic or Presbyterian churches who are now raging like, Holy Spirit people. Like people react all the time. But I think what you're talking about in terms of the role that, it was as far back as I could remember, most of like all the sitcoms in the 80s and 90s and early aughts, the father was basically inept, right? Basically,
except for Bill Cosby,
pretty much a loser, right?
Except for Bill Cosby is the one notable exception.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was, it was baked into the sauce, right?
Yeah.
Then you had I would say over the last 10 years, all the action movies where the major action movie star is a girl. All those came back. All those were the ones that were popular. This pushing of this is, to me, there's like the intersection of, let's call it the manosphere and this whole construct is quite significant. It is not accidental, right? Like you just get this, like the one of the things that I brought this up with John is you have the boomers were fire and brimstone. Like it was like they're the ones that were leading the charge on political engagement and all, like, is very much right or wrong, black and white, that kind of stuff. And the millennials reacted to that by embracing like a third way or third wayism. We're not the party of the elephant or the lamb, or the party of elephant or the donkey, we're the party of the lamb. Like Jesus for President by Shane Claiborne, all of these kind of things, like this third wayism is so, I don't know, squishy is the read, particularly if you're now a Gen Z looking at that, you're going, gosh, man, like, how about, like, did you lose your balls? Like, where like go back and, like, what happened? Why are you so weak? And so this, like, it's a very, the reaction to all this, like the generations is to me man, I love to talk about it, but B, it's insanely fascinating to me. I had my team for several weeks, put together, I had everybody kind of reach out to their friends and build a Gen Z male archetype. And like, what are they about? What are they thinking? What's the like? And it was a really interesting kind of feedback I got because everybody who works for me is Gen Z. And I was like, okay, this is it is so much of the, as you described it, kind of reaction to dad, is such a big part of the zeitgeist we're in. But it's also the fact that dad was so weak, it seemed, right? Like the perception is just weakness. And then the other factor is that if you went to public school, most likely the books you read in, like, let's say junior high school, were either Dr. King or Elie Wiesel. You got this big, like, hit of the blacks and the Jews, and you have to support us because we were once victims. And at the same time, you have immutable characteristics, but you're the problem. You're the source of everything evil in this world. And so you have the weakness that they see in the last generation, the command to support us because we were once victims. It just, like, creates such a reaction, which I totally get. Not only do I get it, but I'm like right there with you. I'm like, yes, that was so weak and it was so annoying. And the fact that, like, my daughter is 20. She went to public school. She read in junior high, Letters from a Birmingham Jail and Elie Wiesel's Night. That's it. Okay. nothing historic, nothing ancient. Now I know that a bunch of people are doing the classical education and homeschool and stuff like that, but that's not where we ended. I couldn't afford it. So, it was but I guarantee like that is so much at the core, at the kind of bubbling from beneath this, that is, to me, is so much the problem we're saying.
Absolutely. Oh, and I got that. I mean, I got that too. Like I'm a Zennial, right? So I'm sort of at the crossover point between Generation X and Millennials, right? So of course I didn't get it quite the same way as Generation Z did, but I went to public school, and then I went to a private high school, and then I went to university in Northern California, right? So, and then I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area until 2015, right? So like, you want to talk about being propagandized against being white and against being male and all these different things. Like I was bathing in it when you were still in high school. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I can, and I got to see the seeds of a lot of it being planted. When I got to Stanford University in 1996, I was a freshman. Well, first of all, it was considered like a minor miracle that a white guy from Phoenix, Arizona got into Stanford University in 1995, 1996. It was considered like impossible. People like, don't even bother applying. Like this is in the mid 90s. Like we're 18 years old, 17, 18 years old in the mid 90s. And it's like, don't bother applying to Stanford if you're white. Right. So it's like, it was back then. And then when I finally got to university, it was like everyone started segmenting out into their different ethnic groups. Right. So there was the black theme dorm, and these are real places. I actually lived in the black theme dorm for 2 years. And the charter of the theme dorm was that half of the residents of the dorm had to be of the theme race. So there's a black theme dorm, the Asian American theme dorm, the Latino American theme dorm, and I believe there was like the Native Americans. So there's 4 of them. Right. And so, and all this was going on very much so. Right. The humanities were declining, STEM was coming up. And then of course you had everything that happened from there. So I empathize with, as in from a position of deep understanding, a lot of the propaganda, a lot of the resentment, and I grew up in a household from a couple of baby boomers as well. Right. So like I empathize. I think the part that I really struggle with is that, is the turn that comes like, so you're supposed to you resent looking at these other people as victims, and your response to that is by becoming a victim yourself. Like we're so put upon, and we're the victims. It's like, why are you playing that game? Why are you descending into that game?
I'll tell you why. It's because that was the game that we were taught to play.
Okay.
Right. Like, so if you're taught that like the way you get ahead is to be a victim, then you're just striving to be a victim. Like it's victimhood Olympics, right? Like, so it seems very natural to me. If you're taught that, and like that's the goal, that's what you're taught how to, we all play the game pretty much like as we're taught. And those points that we're taught this game come pretty early, usually, when we're 12 to 13 years old, like that's where it's baked in. And if you don't, begin to become more self-aware. I mean, I think one of the things that I find very interesting is that a lot of these guys that we're talking about that are so now anti-Israel, that are very much reacting to dad or mom, have, like, are they not self-aware that this is what they're doing? Like, I think about like the way I grew up, and I'm like, what are the things that I'm reacting to in my upbringing, and what's the, like, I think about that stuff a lot. But I guess my assumptions, I guess maybe a bunch of people don't, but like, know thyself is an important characteristic to me. Absolutely. And it's seeming unaware, but I totally, the victimhood thing is real. Cause that's, if you're 12, 13-year-old and you're taught that like, hey, this is how you get ahead, which is why we have this like contagion of people saying that they have disabilities when they don't. They
it's a
have
medical thing.
Right? Like the sudden, was Brown University, where over half the students were saying that they were LGBTQ2A plus stuff, like, because that's how you get ahead. So even if they aren't, it doesn't matter. You're pretending because you're taught to pretend. We all got taught to pretend during COVID, especially.
Yeah. That explanation actually makes sense, because one of the things that I've been struggling with over the past 3 years is that I think everyone who is conservative, and Christian or otherwise, conservative, looked at left-wing wokeness and they called it very rightly the victimhood Olympics. Intersectionality creates this dynamic where everyone's trying to stack up their various oppressor groups to identify who is the most oppressed and gets the oppression gold medal, and then perhaps that person should lead society or something. I don't know. That person becomes the moral authority, I think is what. Okay,
seriously.
And so absolutely. And so I think I'm
a black lesbian woman named Sasha. I
was going to ask you. I was. Sorry. Do we need to rewrite your bio? I think. So
it's the shorter one. It's the other one.
Yes. So Luke Moon is a black lesbian named Sasha. So Sasha. No. Anyway. So people looked at the victimhood Olympics and they saw that going on, and the response to that, I would have thought, would be, I'm not going to be a victim. I'm not going to play that game. But what seems to have happened in the past 3 years is, rather than staying above the fray, above the battle, being magnanimous, right? From a position of true compassion, that there is suffering in the world. And so I don't have to give you moral authority from your suffering, but I can still acknowledge your suffering. So rather than staying at a remove from it, instead men have decided, well, if this is where the battle for supremacy is, we're going to dive in and we're just going to be in the scrum with everyone else being a victim. And that hasn't made any sense to me, but it makes sense now if you're taught from a young age that you get ahead by being a victim, that even that is a strong temptation to play that game. Right. And so, because that's the game that they were taught. That actually, that was not the game that I was taught. I got to see the beginnings of that game, right? But it wasn't the game that I learned how to play early on. I think I still probably grew up during a time of relative meritocracy. But if you grow up during a time of, you get ahead by being a victim, how difficult of a temptation must it be to become a victim yourself and play that game? And how hard must it be to avoid that?
Right. And if you, I find it very interesting that the word that we choose, or that, let's say that many on the right have chosen to describe the people who are the most whatever, is based. And which is a really interesting thing if you think about Plato and Aristotle. But more specifically Plato, right? Okay, because Plato is talking about the philosopher king is the highest form of the person. It's the thing you strive for, right? Yeah. But then what's at the bottom is by living out, the people who live out their most base desires. Literally uses the term. Base desires, which is like of your the things of your stomach, right? Like you're just like obsessed with like whatever your base desires are. But yet we're saying, like, the term used, I see this a lot. The term used for the people who are the most, like, I don't know, root, like at the root or whatever,
gutsy, authentic.
Yeah, exactly. Are based. I'm like, well, that's not what we should be striving for.
That's right.
And it's fun. All this is fundamentally unbiblical too. Like that's the part that, like, is infuriating to me, particularly from the people who should know better. Right. To me, any pastor who is pushing this is pushing sin. They really are, in the way that in the same way, actually, that the priests out of California were pushing 40 days of prayer for abortion. You are you are self-identifying as a Christian and promoting fundamentally unbiblical things, an unbiblical orientation, a way of thinking. It's just like, toxic to me. Like
Mhm.
you are leading people to sin. And I had this whole thing back in when I was fighting same-sex marriage, and I mean I held the banner at the March for Marriage as we're walking in DC on the mall, and the haters are parting the way in front of us and in rage and scorn and all that. Like that was the fight I was doing, right?
Mhm.
And to like there were lots of pastors and priests and people that were of say like let's not talk about that issue, let's avoid it altogether, and so I fought them on that. And here I am fighting my own, like what I thought was my own side, but they're in that same, they picked up that same kind of spirit, but like, the people who are promoting same sex stuff and the rainbow flag. And I was like, well, why don't we have the flag for McDonald's? And why don't we, I mean, if we're really up to it, if there's no restriction at all, why not play porn in church? Like it's
Mhm.
a totally, like if we're going to go in on the world and follow how the world expects us to be, then let's do that. But I don't think that's what we're called to do, especially as
Mhm.
Christians. I think we are supposed to follow Christ and be sanctified by him, and we will be seen by the fruit of the Spirit,
Amen.
which is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, and self-control. And so many of the guys that I'm fighting with on a regular basis, they aren't gentle.
That's right.
They aren't promoting peace or kindness. They barely got self-control. They're terrible witnesses.
Yeah.
And even if your theology, by your understanding, your reading of the Bible, that you embrace the most let's call it extreme form of replacement theology vis-a-vis Israel and Jews,
Mhm.
you still can't hate them.
That's right.
You can't. It's against the full revelation of Scripture for you to do that. To the Jew first, Paul says. Okay? That's just one. It would like boast not of the branches, to quote a great book by Doug Wilson.
That's right.
Right? Jesus himself saying, I have come only for the lost sheep of the house of Israel.
Mhm.
And what these guys are saying is all of that, everything, every reference to the Jews is like negative, nasty, to be hated. The Jews are the worst thing on the planet. They're the synagogue of Satan. They're demons. They're like, and I'm like, guys, I get that you think like go read the Bible. This lady that's running around who is clearly thinks that she has figured out the Catholic Church's teaching on Israel and Jews. It's like, oh, this is what Catholics say. I'm like, you became a Catholic like 20 weeks ago.
Oh, okay. Carrie Pregene.
Yes, Carrie Pregene.
Whatever.
And you talk about the other reaction, like mommy daddy issues. How about like I grew up in a big box dispensational mega church box, right? And everything everything before I found the church, the true church, the only true church, is like heresy and terrible and all that sort of stuff. Like I can't deal with those people, man. It's driving me nuts.
Well, I mean, I think so to come back to a challenger appears in the victimhood Olympics, because I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So my general read is that a lot of these pastors, religious figures, people who have been silent about their faith more or less for years, and now they're standing up and they're saying, "Aha! I am a Christian, or I am a Catholic," or whatever.
Right.
And I see a lot of that as sort of like, I'm speaking very broadly here.
Yeah.
I see it as a very cynical strategy to manipulate and the technical term is grift off of bitterness and victimhood. And my definition of grifting is that you excite anger or pain or anxiety or fear in people, and then you sell them the cure. So so you're listening to someone's content, they're poking at something that you're sore about, whatever it is like, and then they play you net and now buy this and it'll make you feel better. But the thing might not necessarily, play, from A to B. It's not like you have a headache, buy aspirin. It's like, I'm going to poke you and make you anxious. And now I'm going to sell you something that will it's retail therapy. That's it.
Right.
Where the buying of the thing makes you feel better, not the actual thing. And so I see a lot of it as being a very cynical, manipulative ploy, to take advantage of this new group, this new large group that has shown up in the victimhood Olympics. And so it's like, I'm grateful. Like, it's like Russell Brand, Russell Brand, like he says the word Galatians in a video and all of Christendom freaks out. He's a Christian. And then he gets baptized in his underwear and suddenly he's up there talking about theology. And it's like, he's a new age guy still, is my read. But like everyone's really, as soon as someone who's famous or a celebrity starts talking something Christian, a lot of Christians are like, but they're used, the Christians are being used by these people. And that's the thing that's really upsetting to me, because it's like, it's a very cynical strategy using the name of Christ for economic and political ends that I think is ultimately very destructive, because rather than trying to heal people's sense of, say, being betrayed, which I think in some sense is real, they're poking at it and exploiting it, saying, give me fame, give me cash. And it's just, to watch this happen in the name of Christ it's grievous to me, as in I grieve it.
No, I get that. But I also, Paul talks about that actually, where he says like, there are some that preach out of selfish ambition, like as of like, they're doing it for their own gain. Mm-hmm. Okay. But like they're getting it out there. I find the space that we're in right now, it's very frustrating, because there's we're about to enter Easter season. Well, we're already in Lent, but as it gets closer, the Christ is King revival is coming. We're like 3 weeks away from everybody and their mother bringing out Christ is King. And a bunch of people mean it in like a true and honorable way, but a bunch of people mean it in an intentional way as a dig against the Jews.
That's right.
Okay. But what the interesting thing to me is, what does the Bible actually say? The Bible says you cannot say Jesus is Lord without the Holy Spirit. Now, back in the day when I was a missionary, one of the things that, I'd have people, I'd pray for people. Mm-hmm. And one of the things is, in prayer, I would say, all right, well, let's just start out, getting you aligned and in the right place with the Lord. Mm-hmm. And I would say, just confess that Jesus is Lord. And in many cases, actually, people couldn't get the words out of their mouth. Mm-hmm. And then they would say, oh, I can't say it. I can try to get I cannot get my mouth to say it. Mm-hmm. And so we'd pray through that, and eventually, like, whatever was causing that blockage would be unblocked, and they would just start bawling and be able to say it profusely. But it's funny, it's interesting to me, like, in the same way as we talked about based before, the fact that the phrase that is being used is Christ is King and not Jesus is Lord.
That's right.
Is evident to me.
That's right.
Right? Because anybody can say Christ is King, because Christ is like Christ. We think of Christ as being Jesus, but there were lots of Christs, mm-hmm. right? Bar Kokhba was a Christ, right? It's like Christ is basically the Greek form of Messiah. Mm-hmm. There's lots of people that profess that, but the issue is Jesus. Mm-hmm. It's not Christ. The issue is Jesus king? Is Jesus Lord of your life? And as soon as you make Jesus Lord of your life, that means all of this stuff that you have is in the way of that process of sanctification that you have to go through as a believer has to go, like it has to get unpacked right there.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully in the midst of that, you either like you come to see like God exposes those points of sin in your life.
That's right.
I used to be a racist, like a real, like a, Dixie flag racist. Okay.
I love the left turns you're taking in this conversation.
I know. Because when I was growing up, I was riding the bus in Seattle when I was like 12 or something like that. And I was sitting in the back and there was 3 black people behind me, 2 guys and a girl. One of the guys says to me, "Do you think she's pretty?" And I said, "Yes." And then I got punched in the face. And then I got up to move away from that situation. And I got kicked down the aisle of the bus. From that moment on, I grew up in Seattle. So there was like 5 black people. I hated all of them. Okay. Like, I don't know how many were in my school, but 20. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I had no toleration. I used bad words. That was my position towards black people. My grandfather lived in Alabama, used the N-word frequently. I had no issue with it. We had Dixie flags, everything. And it was in my 20s when I was a missionary that this came up as an issue for me. And I had to repent of it.
Yeah. Because
I saw that it was a sin. I saw that I had this hatred and it was exposed to me and I repented of it. And there's a lot of people who need to go through that with their perception of the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Absolutely.
they have embraced hatred in their hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you love the Palestinians, you are not allowed to hate the Jews. Mind you, you're not allowed to hate the Palestinians either.
Not to hate
The problem
anybody.
with this space so much is that, you're expected to love the Jew and hate the Arab, or love the Arab and hate the Jew.
Mm-hmm.
And as a Christian, you're not allowed to do either.
That's
Again, like, what's the evidence of our faith is the fruit of the Spirit. And if you're a pastor and you're teaching people and they're not embracing the fruit of the Spirit, I'm sorry. Like, you are teaching them in error.
That's right. That's right. This, like, they're very quick to quote the imprecatory Psalms. And sometimes I want to point out to them, you do know that David was a Jew, right? You do know that these are Hebrew Psalms, right?
Right.
That that's what's going on. But then they run when I point out, like, where's the fruits of the Spirit in what you're talking about and in your conduct. Like, read Colossians 3. It's all right there. Yeah. And that seems to be like thrown right out the window. You don't know what time it is. You're a cuck, or whatever phrase they're going to use. And again, it literally grieves me. Like, it makes me sad because, and I've said this before, like, these young men, like, and anyone who believes themselves to be a victim, they need Christ in their life. Everyone does, but especially someone who has some sort of internalized victimhood ideology. And to take young men's pain, we'll just talk about young men right now, to take their pain, to take their feelings of abandonment and betrayal and neglect, and to inject poison into that, to turn it into bitterness, and then to use the bitterness to manipulate young men for political and economic ends, and to do all of that in the name of Christ. I have some very extreme words for what that might be, but at risk of sounding hyperbolic, I won't use them.
Right.
But that seems to be what's going on, when what these young men really need is, as you said, sanctification. They really need a renewed heart, a renewed mind, the peace that passes understanding. That will bring them the things that they want. Because you can't build prosperity for your life if you approach your life from bitterness and victimhood. It is innately repulsive. And when men who share a bitter ideology get around each other, it is absolutely a race to the bottom. It becomes a death spiral for everyone involved. And this has been permitted to happen, and now it's being encouraged to happen, and now I think it's being funded to happen. Right. As we talked and I don't know what to do in the face of all of it. A brief pause here. If you've been listening to this conversation and realize that your understanding of Israel, the Jews, or even the Old Testament has been shaped more by memes and influencers than by scripture and first-hand investigation, that's worth paying attention to, because that kind of drift rarely stays in one lane. If you've been intellectually lazy or tribal in one area, there's a good chance it's showing up in others, in how you read the Bible, how you lead your family, how you make decisions, or how you think about your own life and direction. That's the kind of thing I help men work through in mentorship. This isn't therapy, and it isn't coaching in the modern sense. It's structured, serious conversation oriented toward clarity, direction, and spiritual formation using scripture as the foundation. If that resonates with you, the next step is a conversation. You can book a clarity call using the link below. We'll talk for about 30 minutes, explore where you are, what you're wrestling with, and whether working together makes sense. If not, no pressure. But if this episode made you uncomfortable in a productive way, that's probably worth following up on. The link is below. And maybe that's not the right, maybe of course,
no,
pray
I,
and script. Yeah.
I think you're on, I think there's several things. One is one of the things I just spent far too much time in the last several days watching Tucker Carlson's video interview with Mike Huckabee.
Sure.
And one of the things that he consistently does, or Tucker does, is actually he's the one that's most pessimistic about America. This is like, it's the worst that we're not better off. We're not better off than we were. Okay.
That's odd.
And it's like, well, that's actually fundamentally not true on every statistic. And it's what to me is amazing about Trump is that Trump spends so much time talking about, well, this is the best ever. This is the best thing that's ever happened. We're the best. We're gonna have peace for the first time in 3,000 years in the Holy Land, right? Like that's like he so pushes he's almost the opposite, right? He's hyperbolic in the direction of like it's amazing. It's the best it's ever been. Okay.
It's fantastic.
Whereas what you see consistently being pushed on these young men is that it's terrible. That's actually is like the reason that you cannot buy a house is because $3.8 billion is given to Israel, which is then turned around and given to America, which is just like, it's just absurd to me.
Yeah.
But to your point that they're making money off of this grift, off of this negative feedback loop, because if you're selling that everything's good, then it takes back in one of the organizations I used to run was Philos Project, and people would come and ask us to do small dollar, fundraising mailings and that kind of thing, right? And if you're sending out mailings, like donor mailings or fundraising letters, and you want to get money from people, you have to basically say, the sky is falling. We're all going to die. But if you give me $50, I'll make it right. That's the pitch of your tradition. Like, I get mail. I'm that age, so I get mail from like the NRA. The NRA, I can pull you the NRA envelope. I can open it up, and I guarantee it's going to talk about all the things, all the people who are trying to take away our guns. Mind you, they are. But nonetheless, that's the pitch. And the funny thing is like when I was running the Fields Project, I was not selling that. I didn't have a message like we're all going to die unless you give me $50, because I didn't think it was that bad. And I went to, let's say since November, I've been all over the country. I've been in LA, Phoenix. I've been in Seattle. I've been in Dallas. I've been Nashville. I've been down in Florida. And I live in New York. I've been in South Carolina. I like to go. I like to go shopping. I'm one of those guys, right? Don't hate me.
That's okay. You got a nice jacket on. I can see it.
Exactly. But every mall is full. I mean, I was in Nashville this last weekend. I went to I had to park so far away. I got my steps in before I even made it to the front door of the mall.
Yeah.
And it was like packed. And I'm telling you how I was really far away from the front. Like not in that first section. Not like normally if you can drive around and find that like that one store that's kind of not doing so well and you can park in front of it and go in there. No, none of that. It was full of people. And that's been the case. So how is it that everything's so bad? How are you saying that everything's so you've trained a people who are already of the mind that they are victims. It's like everybody's out to get them. And then you got these leaders who are feeding this like it's the worst ever. You can't get ahead. You can't get ahead because of the Jews.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's evil. It really is. And the fact that these people are running around using the Bible and using Christian language to make that case is like kind of doubling down on the evil.
Yeah.
If they were children, I would use the verse that, if you prevent these children or you like doing something against these children, I'd rather put a millstone around your neck and, dropped into the deepest part of the sea. Like Jesus had very strong words to say about people who abuse and use children.
That's right.
And it's the same mentality. And they're using the name of Jesus. It is literally like using the name of God in vain. You reference the commandment 5 was they got some problems with commandment 1 too.
That's right.
Because it's like properly saying like this is what the Lord is doing, and it's not. It's evil. And I think a big part of our message, the way we break through. This is a principle I learned in the mission field is like you operate in the opposite spirit of the evil you're confronting. Right. If you have greed in your heart, generosity is how you overcome it. Okay. If you have, like whatever it is you're confronting, do the opposite of that and you will break through. So if it is negative, if you're pushing pessimism, or if the person is pushing pessimism, that's how they're getting their power. Optimism is the antidote. I mean, I spoke last week at there was a conference and I spoke I think 4 times, and I basically gave the same talk 4 times. And the talk I gave was, there is hope, and here's why. And I laid out my case, and everybody else was like so down in the dumps. I'm like, guys, it might not appear, but the way that you overcome it is in the opposite spirit. And the spirit that we're fighting, this darkness, this victimhood spirit that we're fighting, this pessimism we're fighting, has to be confronted in the opposite way. And so to me, that's what I'm calling it out for one thing. Like, it's like it's one of the, done a reaction video to Tucker's interview with Huckabee, part 1 of it. And I call it out there. I call it out on stage this last week. Everybody who will talk to me, they're getting the like optimistic Luke message, because we have to kill it. We have to kill that poison. Yeah. And to me, that's the way we do it.
Yeah. That's very well said. And it's not about killing the individual, right? No. Like just to be clear, this is about killing the poison. Yeah. I mean, it's not that Tucker himself is the poison or Candace or anything like that. Right. It's that these people have been poisoned. They have ingested the poison, and they have allowed it to transform their minds and their hearts and their spirits, and they are now spreading the poison. And that's the problem, and that the poison within them needs to be killed. It is ultimately a sanctification question for each and every individual, and maybe perhaps a generational sanctification question, even a national sanctification question. And so the way I love the guidance to confront in the opposite spirit. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because the part of the spirit that I see is this kind of creeping, hiding, it's like hinting, winking with the eyes and pointing with the toes. You know what I mean? It's like, no, let's actually step out into the open and have a conversation in the sunlight, like men stating the things that we actually believe. Let's say them in clear speech and no hedging. Just share your worldview with me. Don't worry, just share. You can say it, right? And so I think it's important for every man to be able to do that truthfully, because I think a lot of this wants to hide and pretend that it isn't what it is. No, I don't believe that. I believe this. Like, well, why are you saying all this? What? That? Look over here. It's like, no, let's just have this conversation in the open. So let's talk now, about what I think might be the most unpopular idea on earth for just about everybody, left and right, and that is support for Israel. And that has happened very quickly, by the way, that it used to be some things that you couldn't say, and used to be you couldn't say things against the Jews. Now everyone, it seems to be popular to say things against the Jews. Now you can't say things in support of them. And I think part of this, and Israel as well. And one of the things that I appreciate about you is that you've said that you're an avowed Christian Zionist. Now we probably need to define what that means, which I think is really important. But I think it's important for people to hear why you believe what you believe, especially knowing the road that you walked and the work that you do, and the thing and your sympathies with Generation Z and the things you understand, to begin talking about this. Like, let's bring all this stuff into the open, because it's all there on the table already.
Right. Yeah, I'll tell you why I used to call myself a Christian who's a Zionist, but at some point I'm like, forget it. I get tired of trying to pretend things, and people like, oh, they're gonna be nice to me if I say I'm a Christian who's a Zionist, rather than if I'm like, just say I'm a Christian Zionist. I found that there was no difference. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll embrace the thing you hate. Fine,
spare a
right?
couple
So
syllables.
like, check the box. Like, I've been called every name under the book so many times that I can't be bothered to care. Mm-hmm. So Christian, I'm a Christian. I love Jesus. Jesus is my King. He is the Lord of my life. I will die for Jesus.
Amen.
Like, absolutely. Okay. I absolutely adore Jesus. So I'm a Christian. Okay.
Same.
Zionist, I actually think that Zionism is the belief that the Jews have a right to live in the land that was promised to them as an everlasting covenant. I think the word everlasting actually means everlasting. I think everybody embraces some kind of, everybody is embracing some kind of theological understanding of the world all the time. And it's what we're arguing about is what your theology is. Who are you actually, what you like, there are documents, ancient documents that I think point to truth. One is the Bible, which I think is the truest of truths. I think that was the anti-Semitism, the irrational hatred of the Jewish people, rooted in the fact that they're the people by whom God brought his moral revelation into this world.
That's right.
And the Bible talks about those who love darkness. They hate the light. And what do they hate? They hate the fact that someone brought this moral revelation into this world. And who is that people? It happened to be Jews. On Mount Sinai, in a place, you can go there today, actually. And they wandered around and all that stuff. All that stuff I believe to be fundamentally true. I actually believe, to my earlier point about, biblical inerrancy being the big thing in the day, I believe the Bible is true. It is a blueprint of God for humanity. And if that's the blueprint of God for humanity, that means when he says that I will give this to your offspring, I will give this land as an everlasting covenant. I'm like, okay, that's what he says. I don't know how he's going to work it out. I don't know how, where the land, is it to the Euphrates and the Nile and the Great Sea and the mountains of Lebanon? Okay, maybe. Is it smaller? Maybe. Is God going to do what God's going to do? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
What does the clay have to say to the potter? Why'd you make me this way?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like God could smite us like just like boom, nothing.
Yeah.
And he can, and if he does it, it's totally within his right. And
That's
I
right.
have no right to complain about it. Like, to me, it's all fundamentally right there. Now, some people think like there's a lot of people that like are big into the Constitution. They will die on the Second Amendment or in the First. Yeah, right?
Mhm.
Like they believe an ancient text is a guiding principle for how we live today. I believe the ancient text is the Bible that guides us in a bigger way. And I think so to me, Christian Zionism is the belief that of Christians that the Jews have a right to live in that land that was promised to them as an everlasting covenant.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it doesn't mean actually, it doesn't have anything to do with like the official government of Israel, meaning down to the king or the prime minister or whoever happens to be currently in charge. What I mean is this kind of meta structure of Israel. Because when the Israelites were coming back from the Babylonian captivity with Ezra and Nehemiah, it wasn't like, God was really concerned about the structure of government that was going to be put in place, when they all got back. And it also didn't go back with a bunch of like super religious Jews. How do we know that? Because Ezra is complaining about how the priests had married foreign wives. If the priests had married foreign wives, and you got to think that everybody else was basically less than that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it was probably more like the people who came to the New World, escaping whatever, or the people that went west to cut logs and fish and mine for gold. It's like those were the people that went back with Nehemiah and Ezra, and the people that went to start the state of Israel, in the various waves of Aliyah. They were that same kind of people that just didn't have anything else. I mean, occasionally you get a rich person mixed in, but rarely. Rich people don't want to leave the comfort of where they're at.
That's right.
Like it's always the people who just got, don't got anything else going. That's fine. But to me, like it's a very, I don't see, I mean, even Paul in Romans 11, he says like, he says the gifts of the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. And he's talking about the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
Like 11 times in Genesis, God says 8 times to Abraham, he says, to your offspring, I will give this land. Okay. Then he says it twice to Isaac, and he says it once to Jacob. So 11 times in the book of Genesis. And the book of Matthew opens with a genealogy from Abraham to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's like it's in the water. You can ask a fish, well, do you think the fish still believes in water? Well, yeah, probably. Like if he
right.
had a concept of it apart from him, I doubt it. Right. But that's, so I don't think it was funny last week. I presented, and afterwards this kid comes up to me and says, Luke, do you think that we're in this point in history where you think that this is unfolding of this thing so that this other thing can happen in the future? I'm like, dude, I got to break it to you. I don't think about end times. I don't talk about the end times. I don't really care about the end times. I like how it works out. I don't think we actually can. It's kind of God's plan.
Yeah.
And I'm like one of those like full sovereignty of God guys that think God's going to work it out, how he's going to work it out. And he's just going to do what God does. And I think what we're seeing now is a reaction to God, for a generation, because God does that in various generations. 70 times in the Hebrew Bible, God says, I'm going to do X, and he fill in the blanks, so that the nations of the world will know that I am their God.
Mm-hmm.
70 times. that God says, I'm going to do something to the Jews so that the nations will know I'm their God. And I'm like, clearly to me, what we are watching is God's doing something.
Yeah.
Because like the conversation about Israel now is very different than the conversation about Israel a decade ago when I started doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so many podcasters, pundits bring up the Bible. It's theopolitical conversations now, which means that like it is they'll start with politics, but shift in the Bible really fast, or shift into God. And they're like debating about what God or the church, or like even we brought up this, the Carrie Pogene Bowler conversation. Like, she was the one that at the Religious Freedom Commission, was adamant that the Catholic Church is against Zionism.
Mm-hmm.
Well, fundamentally, actually, is not true. The Catholic Church's teaching is much more nuanced than she gives even to this day on social. But like, even that conversation steered into like Christianity and the Christian teaching on it. And like Tucker, when he talking to people about it, swerves into theology all the time. When Candace talks about it, she swerves into theology. When Nick Fuentes talks about it, he swerves into theology. And then you have the actual theologian guys who are doing it too. J.D. Hall and Webben and all these guys that are swinging into this stuff all the time. They're all like, the theopolitical angle of this is real. And I think to me, it's again, to the sovereignty point, it's not accidental. It's like God is going to do something that's going to basically blow everybody's mind. I mean, he's done it several times. I mean, it was very interesting to me in the first two rounds of massive barrages of rockets and drones and missiles and cruise missiles and hypersonic missiles coming out of Iran towards Israel. Something in the range of, let's say, 1,500 rockets and some type of flying thing, that not a single Jew died. Okay? The two people in the first two barrages, one died the first time, one person died the second time. The first time it was a Palestinian Arab, and the second time was a guy in Jericho walking down the street. It's like literally there's video. It's a ballistic missile. It's like a silo-sized ballistic missile drops on the guy, dies. And then the third time, I think there was like 36 people died. Still, the majority were not Jewish. More people died in the second barrage in Iran because one of the rockets exploded on the ground and 12 Iranians died. Now, we can say all of that is a matter of just time and chance and accidental fuses and whatever. But
that exists. Time and chance.
It's like, I mean, I had this conversation with, I was speaking to a group of IDF soldiers who are coming to learn about America, and I get brought in to teach them about like Christians. And I was like, and I raised this point. I was like, you guys, I know you think about this in terms of like, it's purely, because you had such superior firepower, and the Americans joined and the Jordanians joined and the Saudis joined. And yeah, but all of them, you got all of them, and not a single Jew died. Really? And that's just time and chance. And just like, it's just, that's my I actually wrote an article, hoping to get published, where I said, like, even the people who don't, like, the conversation within Christendom about Israel and the Jews and the land and et cetera, it isn't about whether God's involved, because the official teaching from both the Reform side and the Catholic side, in terms of like Westminster Confession of Faith and the Catechism of the Catholic Church, both affirm providence of God, which means that God is actually at work in the formation of Israel on the baseline providentially. So theologically, you have to accept as a Christian a theological support for the land and the Jews living in it, because we don't believe in time and chance and in just random international incidences and whatever. We actually believe in the providence of God. He is active in the affairs of man. So providentially, 100%. Every Christian denomination, every Christian needs to affirm some form of providence in that action. What we're going to then argue about is what happens after that. What is the does it have greater meaning into the future? Then we split on all kinds of lines. But at the base, we all actually affirm theological support for Israel. At the base.
I mean, one of the things I think I'm on pretty firm historical ground here, and I'm definitely not the first person to make this observation. It's bad to bet against the Jews. Like it was like Mark Twain who said that, at first, like in the 1800s, like why are they still here? Right? Like of all the people, if you were to run back the clock 2,000 years and just look at all the people groups, who existed on earth 2,000 years ago, the only one left are the Jews. Right there. So it seems to be unwise to bet against them. And I think that's just an observation that history kind of bears out. And I think it's also a bad bet to turn against them because the most recent example of a nation that turned against the Jews is the Germans, right? They decidedly did it. And Germany has been wiped out. I don't know if people recognize just how devastated Germany is forever, the most favored nation in all of Europe. Like Germany was probably the most, in terms of high culture, the arts, natural beauty, right? Philosophy, music, everything, technology, industry, right? Education. Germany literally had it all. And Germany now, like is like they're deindustrializing essentially, right? And the degeneracy of the German people, that just wrecked. They have no sense of national kind of spirit anymore. And we could talk about the Red Army and that, and the German genetic superiority in terms of their belief, in terms of their genetic superiority over the Slavs to the east, and then what happened after the war in regard to genes being mixed forever. Like if you look at that through a biblical lens, those people were wiped out. They were erased, right? And so and it so stained the family name of Europe that it's unclear whether Europe has a future because it's been so shattered in terms of its belief in itself. That's how I read it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And actually, I'm a big proponent. Like I think as God says in the Bible, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And the way that, back in the day when I was a social justice warrior, like one of the projects I undertook was to go through the entire Bible and list out the what I call the incidences of injustice. Okay. And I defined injustice as an abuse of power. Okay. So like when, so adultery is not necessarily an abuse of power, but rape is. Okay. Like both are sins, but one is like you're coming on to something, or murder is an abuse of power, and et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that I started to kind of explore is like there are the way that God deals with injustice is through violence, and violence of the nation that does it. Okay. There's not literally every time, and certainly in the Bible every time. And so I started looking at like where in American history, like, so to me, like Sherman's march through the South, which was brutal, like literally like some of the worst, like most horrific things. People in the South really don't like Sherman because like he pillaged, burned towns, raped women, like everything that you think happened on Sherman's march through the South. And what was Sherman's march through the South to me? Maybe like, I'm not going to like say this is 100%, but it sure seems to me like that is the punishment of God for the sin of slavery. Okay. There are other moments in American history where I'm like, oh, that looks, that was pretty bad on us. and what was the sin that was going on preeminently at that time.
Right.
Okay, like God uses these things, and so I actually apply that around the world, mind you. But it, like, there was God drove the Jews out of the land.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which means that, but he also can bring them back. He did it before, said he would. Said he would do it, not because of their righteousness, but because of his.
Mm-hmm. His covenant.
Okay. So there's a bunch of people who say, oh, that can't be God because of X, Y, and Z. Well, why not? I'm actually reformed. I think God can do what God wants to do.
That's right. Yeah. I think, and it says over and over that God uses the nations to judge Israel and then judges the nations.
He does. Habakkuk is my favorite book on that front, because it's like, Habakkuk going to God and saying, hey, how come you allow all this evil to happen? Like righteousness stumbles in the streets. Why aren't you doing something? And God says to Habakkuk, oh, I will. I'm going to send the Babylonians. And Habakkuk's like, wait. That's not what I meant. I do not those people. And then God's like, oh, don't worry. I'll take care of them too. Right? Like that's chapter 1, 2, and 3. Basically, the end, Habakkuk is like, okay, God, you are going to do what you're going to do. That's where, Habakkuk is, I totally see Habakkuk. But to me, that is I don't want to come under the judgment of God as a nation.
That's right.
And I am very aware that we can. And if there's a toxicity in America that needs to get excised. And I think we have to start calling out. And I think that's what is, I think there's a lot of, these evangelistic rallies that are happening on college campuses all over America and high schools and stuff. And a lot of people are coming to faith. I think it's like we're on the edge of a revival and we could go in two different directions. But what's interesting to me is that what is the main issue driving the wedge against, like, as a means of kind of attacking this? It's very interesting to me that it's the Jews.
That's right.
Who's attacking Erica Kirk the most? Charlie, I know so many people who came to faith after Charlie's assassination. In like, even I was at the memorial where J.D. Vance says, I'm not one who talks about my faith. That's not, I'm not that guy. But I have talked more about God in the last week than I ever have in my life. And he paused for a minute. And you could see the emotion. He was trying to hold it together, and he did. But the display of God and Christ, and the power of Christ, and Erica forgiving the guy who murdered her husband, just wrecked people. I mean, so many people have told me they don't understand how she could, is that Christianity? And they want that. And I run around with some of the folks. Unite is one of the big groups that does rallies. And one of my staff went to one of the Unite event at Clemson in South Carolina, the university. And she said it was majority men who were there. And so to me, like, in the midst of this toxicity, God is up to something. And I think it's people who want to be on the side of selling Christ, of making the case for Christ, of helping God transform a person's heart who sees themselves as being beat down, the victim, the abused, the like, you're just in a rut, you're stuck. And it's to those who say, like, come to Christ. Come to Jesus. He will show you the way out of this mess that you're in. And that's the only way. And to turn away from all this bitterness and resentment and anger. Just about every epistle in the New Testament ends where Paul or Peter or John, they're all getting correct, and they're like, don't let divisiveness come in. Don't like deal with the divisiveness. And to me, it's like, okay, this stuff with Israel is just so toxic. And so even the people, listen, I'm a hardcore Christian Zionist. I'm going to pound away at this issue because I'm a sucker for lost causes. But at the same time, even if you don't believe that, I'm not telling everybody you have to be a Christian Zionist. But I do think you can't hate the Jews. You don't have to go all the way to Luke's position, but you can't hate them. And so, like, to me, there's some sort of bottom lines here, and I want people to find the peace that they're looking for, and they're not going to find it in hating the Jews. You're just not.
I'm glad you mentioned Charlie Kirk's memorial, because I remember after his killing, after his assassination, there was this great outpouring of true faith, right? Like the response was not, let's go on there was two things. The response was not, let's go on a killing rampage. Let's forgive, right? Let's talk about our faith more openly. Let's be as courageous as Charlie was to be bold in our defense of the truths that we know. Give a reasoned defense for the hope that is within us. That was the real spirit that was happening. And then there was Erica Kirk's forgiveness on stage. And I remember now that made a lot of guys really mad. It was very noteworthy. That was on a Sunday, and the outpouring of outrage towards her on Monday was like, she has no right to do that. She doesn't get to do that. What do you mean? Like, of course she gets to do that. That doesn't mean that, like, then there's this whole big debate about, forgiveness, you're letting him off the hook. Like, no, like they're not talking about like he should, the killer, if and when he's caught and tried and convicted, he should go free. That's not what she's talking about. And so immediately there was this, it was like violent outrage response. But for a period of time, there was a real beautiful growth of the true Christian spirit in response to a horrific act of violence. And what happened immediately after that? The narrative started so quickly about, well, it wasn't it wasn't it wasn't Tyler Robinson who's been arrested and he presuming him not guilty until convicted by a court of law. So let's just be clear about that. It's not him. It was actually Israel. And we're going to spin up this whole big thing. And it was like all of this ugliness and toxicity is just vomited out into the public discourse in just massive volumes. And it keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And it was as if this moment that had the true chance for real beauty and national renewal was like co-opted so quickly and spun into something completely opposite from everything that Charlie Kirk stood for. And that, to me, that's the real psyop, right? And it was executed with force and with overwhelming force. I can't say with skill, but with overwhelming force. And now we're still living in the aftermath of it. And as you talk about the memorial, and I remember the feeling of that time, where people were really reflecting on themselves, like maybe I need to be more bold in my faith, that has now been replaced by something so much uglier. And it's like, I kind of want to go back to those early days. And I don't know, honestly, how we get back there.
Well, I will say that we're still on our way, actually. Mm-hmm. Like there's a revival. There's some evangelistic event on a college campus just about every day this week, somewhere in the country. That is happening. Okay. So you do have that movement is still churning away. Now it's not getting the attention it did as it did in those first days. But again, to my point earlier about God is up to something, the fact that this, like, Israel became the wedge issue that was used by Candace and company to undermine this revival, to me, like, reaffirms why there's something unique going on with Israel and Jews.
That's right.
Because, like, again, I'm not a time and chance guy. I just think, like, this is really interesting. And I think there is, like I said, there was like the revival event at Clemson, majority dudes, which was unusual. Like, I think that is what again, like there's a couple of, the devil doesn't want this to happen. The devil does not want there to be this national revival.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to do whatever he can to undermine it, thwart it, go at it. And he, unfortunately, using poor images of Christians to do it. But it is we who are, as you were talking about that, I get the sense that there is, there's a way of, there's not there, particularly with like the guys who are looking at that act of forgiveness as a symbol of weakness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's the reaction, because it's at third wayism. It's like we don't have any real spine. We just kind of fall to everything that comes our way. And I think it's actually the opposite.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, it takes more courage to forgive your enemy, to forgive those who persecute you, than it does to respond in the same way.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
It is not. It's the opposite of weakness. Yeah. And and to me, that's the challenge to. That's the challenge to the men, is to you want to fight on the right side of things. Like, it takes more courage to stand up as a Christian Zionist than it does to fall with whatever else is out there.
That's right.
I mean, the polling out there, of Gen Z in support for Israel is in the tank. It's fine. I'm like, okay, fine. But when you drill down, you see most people are answering, I don't know. They're answering like whatever. It's not a conviction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's important.
And so what I'm calling men of conviction to rise up.
Mm-hmm.
Because the weak men are out there. I see them every day. It's easy to hate the Jews because that's what everybody else is doing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, the thing that I used to, when I was a missionary, I mean, I was always wanting to go to the hardest places in the world. Like there was this, I remember I was working on it before I felt like the Lord was calling me to DC, which was also insane. But like there's an annual like voodoo pagan ritual sacrifice event every year in Haiti. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go there and I'm going to preach the gospel there. I mean, I in the 90s, in the early 90s, I lived in Asheville, North Carolina, and there was an annual Wicca festival in downtown Asheville, North Carolina. Yeah. And I would go preach the gospel in downtown North Carolina. Mm-hmm. I mean, I taught at an underground Bible seminary in China. Pastors how to study the Bible. And every one of them has now gone to prison multiple times. Wow. I got run out of a town in Nepal by Maoists after preaching the gospel. I had the RSS, which is the kind of militia wing, the violent wing of BJP, which is Modi's party. Modi's in the news right now, but he's got there's RSS. They actually model themselves after the SS, so that's what they are. Anyways, they were. I was teaching people how to do evangelism in India, and they got word that I was there, and we're we're outside my hotel for 3 days. As I would open the window, look down, I can't go out today because they were waiting for me to come out. Right, like. That to me that's courage. That's just general badassery. Okay. And what I'm calling, like, it's easy to follow the crowd. It's easy to be an anti-Zionist because that's what everybody else is now. Okay. But if you want to be like on the right side of history, what does the Bible say? How's the Bible end? It's like the gates of the city are named after the Jews, the 12 tribes. Mm-hmm. So they're at the end. I don't know.
No, this is great. Man. No, this is fantastic because, and I'm so grateful to know all that. First of all, thank you. like crazy. I've done a bit of global travel myself, and but I wasn't a Christian at the time, but I know how when you can be in countries like India. I haven't been to Haiti, right? But I've been to Vanuatu, which is not super different in some ways. Like I've been to countries that are like this, and I understand that the rules of society work very differently there than they do in the United States, like very, very differently. And so, if there's one name above all names that invites hatred and anger and oftentimes murder and martyrdom, it is the name of Christ. And so,
Right.
huge respect to you for preaching the gospel in these very dangerous and remote places. And so that's really great, because there is a rising tide of antichrist anger in America right now, particularly with Gen Z men, which I know you're aware of. And one of the first conversations that you and I had on the study group trip was around your evangelism to the Groypers. And I don't know that you and I ever got the chance to actually have that conversation. And so, I think there's a moment now where we could talk about some of the things that you say to them, because, they're hostile, not necessarily to the name of Jesus, though the name of Christ is one thing. The name Jesus is Lord is something else entirely, as we've talked about.
Right.
But there's a lot of hostility to the Jews, and sometimes that hostility slips into hatred of Christianity as universalized Judaism, which you probably heard that before.
Right.
So, but I wonder if you could preach the gospel in that way, speak towards them, and we can have the conversation that you and I never got the chance to.
Yeah. I mean, I spend a lot of time with those guys, and most of the time, we're unpacking verses. I mean, oftentimes it's actually, because a lot of them either are self-identifying as Catholics or as some type of Reformed Christian. And so they in most instances, they have embraced the idea that the church now, because I haven't done a lot with the pagan guys, because it's not, they're actually seemingly not as many. I've dealt with a lot of pagans, but not so much on the right. I see it, but I haven't dealt with them much. Most of who I'm engaging is on the Reform side or the Catholic side, both of whom have embraced a form of replacement theology or supersessionism.
Yeah.
That is, it is beyond what any of the reformers taught. Like
hard supersessionism.
It's a hard supersessionism. It's like the old covenant, the old, like you can almost call me like a continuationist, right? Because in Galatians, everybody quotes Galatians 3:16, which says it does, there's not seeds plural, but it's seed singular, which is Christ. Okay. Which is in the midst of a whole section. And I could, the interesting thing on that is, in multiple times in Genesis, where God says to Abraham, to your offspring, I will give this land. And he goes on to say, he actually either starts or ends somewhere in that midst of that by saying, look at the stars in the heavens. Can you count them? Or look at the sand of the seashore. So shall your offspring be. Right? Like that is not a singular. It's clearly a plural, but nevertheless, it's the only one they know is actually this idea. But it says in talking about the difference between the Abrahamic and Mosaic covenants, it says, and the law came 430 years after the promise, and the covenant that comes before it does not nullify the covenant that comes after. Okay, which means that the covenant that comes after does not nullify the covenant that comes before it. Meaning that the Mosaic covenant does not nullify the Abrahamic covenant. Which then means that if that's the principle, then that applies. Like I don't think the Adamic covenant, which is to be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, is are all of these Reform guys? Do you this is the kind of conversation I have. Is that covenant annulled by the new covenant? Is that one done? They
No.
would say no. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we got one. Like,
Yeah.
work my way down the list. Okay.
Yeah.
Then the new is a continuation of the covenants, which means that all the covenants still apply. But the great thing about what the Council of Jerusalem did is it didn't require us as Gentiles to embrace the Mosaic covenant, particularly the like laws of kosher, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And which is why all of the in speaking to the Gentiles, Paul is appealing to Abraham, because we're getting in by faith is the like, and so it's like then the Abrahamic covenant still stands, and therefore you are grafted into this story. That's the unpacking of it. And so most of what the conversation with the Groypers unpacks is what is the relationship of the Gentile Christian into that story in relation to the Jews. So I would and I make the case that the physical is like matters a lot to God. Like it's not enough that like to have nice thoughts in our heads about faith and all these things, but that the physical things that we do point to deeper spiritual truths, which is how Paul, almost 30 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus, could offer sacrifices in the temple and have that be like, he's the guy who said Jesus is the ultimate sacrifice. And yet he is offering sacrifices in the temple 30 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus. Well, he knows that. But it's almost like actually it becomes more powerful, because the way that the sacrifice was to be done is the person who particularly where you're transferring the sin of the guilty onto the innocent, you slit the throat of the animal as your hand is on it, so you can feel the life go from it, which is a terrible thing to feel. It really is. I mean, I another story. Well, I once taught the book of the Pentateuch to a group of Americans who were traveling around the land of the Bible, and they were studying the Bible and the lands of the Bible, about 30 of them. And I was to teach the Pentateuch. So I got to the book of Leviticus, and I was like, man, I don't like, how do I make this? How do we make it so it's understandable, this idea of sacrifice and the transfer of innocent to guilt, and Jesus being the ultimate sacrifice and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, I wonder what it would cost to get a goat in a butcher. Turned out it was only $50 to get a goat in a butcher. And so I taught all morning from 9 to 11, all about Leviticus. And I said, I'm going to pick this up. Let's pick this up downstairs in the courtyard. And in the courtyard was a goat and a butcher.
Wow.
And he slit its throat, and everybody freaked out, but everybody knew what it meant. All of a sudden, they watched that happen, and it hit them. I mean, it hit me too. I mean, I remember to this day, it was whoa, like that kind of, so bringing it into my conversations with Groypers is unpacking the New Testament. I make the case for Israel almost exclusively out of the New Testament, from Matthew all the way through Revelation. There's so much I can use in that, and it's pretty much, most of the time they're long conversations, and they're fun too, because I love talking about this stuff. But Bibles in hand and kind of going through the stuff. But I would love it if it was like I'm seeing all this transformation. Most of the time, I'm not. But I know that I'm like, I didn't grow up in this world. I didn't grow up, unlike you. I'm not Jewish. I grew up I don't think I knew any Jews until 2011. I had no context for this. I was not interested in it. I didn't grow up in a home that was super one way or another. They also didn't really care. And so all of the stuff that I'm doing these days related to making the case for Israel and the Jewish people comes out of me reading the Bible and believing that God is up to something special, and I want to be a part of that because I'm a really big fan of watching God work. I've seen him change people. I've seen him change me. And when you see that, and when you see what God does, you're like, I got to be a part of that. And if you're like, I mean, it's my like my starting point with everybody. It's like, how about give it a shot? See what happens. How about don't hate the Jews? Yeah, like there's the great verse everybody uses, Genesis 12:3. I'll bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And I'm of the mind that the blessings grow over time, which means like it's not like when I'm nice to a Jew, all of a sudden like cash falls out of heaven. Right. None of that happens. Okay. But I'm also of the mind that the curses grow too. Meaning like I have a bunch of friends who, are still like from the back in the day when I was a social justice warrior, who are like they used to, like, let's say 3 years ago or 4 years ago, their normal like stories and Facebook threads and all that sort of like was the general smattering of usual progressive stuff, abortion and like whatever was hot at the moment, they would all like kind of push those guys. Now they're like the only thing they talk about is Israel and Jews and Palestine and all that. Yeah. Like it's like they're like it's a one-track mind. Yeah. And we see that with a lot of other people too. Like we see it with Tucker, we see it with Candace, we see it with these guys, and it's like, yeah, like they used to be normal people, and you're like, what happened? I get that question all the time. Like this week, like at least 10 times I've gotten that question. Like, what happened to Tucker? He used to be so, and I'm like, yeah, those curses, they kind of grow. It keeps going, and it's like, and this is one of my favorite preachers, Steve Brown, used to have a radio show, and he said, God greases the wheels in the direction you're going. Yeah. And that's what we see. And it's, there's a bunch of us over here saying, stop, don't do that. Don't go down that road. Don't do it anymore. Like, turn around. That's our job. So.
As part of my book club, I've been discussing the book Black Sun, which is about neo-Nazi movements since World War II, sort of the occult, theosophical kind of perspective, and Luciferian satanic influences that have taken place since World War II. And one of the books that's mentioned consistently, one of the works that's mentioned consistently in Black Sun is called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion is a conspiratorial document that holds that the Jews are behind all world evil and have been basically forever, like a secret meeting of Jews. And so there's a book that was written by about the Protocols of the Elders of Zion called Warrant for Genocide by Norman Cohn. And I have a copy of this book here. This book is rare. It's used. It's out of print. Copies go for more than $40 on eBay. And I've been reading it, and this will, in all likelihood, I want to finish it first. This will, in all likelihood, be the next book in the book club as we unpack what because the Protocols is actually what has traveled forward in time and inspired the Russians, quote unquote, inspired the Nazis. And it's a very well-known thing in the conspiracy world. And I mentioned it in my Christ Over All article. Like it drives a lot of this. And I had a male influencer friend, with more than 100,000 followers on X. And, he, as soon as I wrote that Christ Over All article, he reached out to me. That he just called me out of the blue that day, essentially. And we had a long argument about the Protocols specifically. And I was shocked that seemed to be central to his worldview, as in it had really taken root deep in his heart as the way that he understands reality. And I know for a fact he's not alone. And so I felt it was important to understand what the protocols are. I have a copy of them outside the office, and just read them directly. And then, of course, read Warrant for Genocide by Norman Cohn. And I think it's interesting, as I've been listening to you talk, I think there's a choice that's being placed before many, we'll say, Christian men today. Do you believe what the Bible says about the Jews? Do you believe what God says about them? Or do you believe what Satan says about them? And that, I think, is what the protocols actually are. And so I invite anyone listening, if they'd like to be a part of the book club, we could talk about that separately. But it really is difficult, because I think for an entire generation that has been raised on, what is Gen Z, was born around the time of 9/11, something like that. And now they're then in their college years, basically they get hit with, COVID and conspiracy material that originally was fringe now has become just another entertainment genre, right? Alex Jones and
Right.
some of the stuff that Joe Rogan talks about, and Brett Weinstein is talking about like 9/11 on the X timeline this week. Yeah, fine, talk about all these things, but this thing that used to be considered, we don't talk about that, now everyone is talking about it, and at the center of the conspiracy world is in many ways the protocols. And so that, I think, is what we're seeing. It's just flooding in, not just into the dialogue itself, but into young men and many women's minds and hearts, and is just corrupting their entire worldview and perspective. And now it becomes their guiding way of understanding reality, and to rip that off them, to peel it off of them, and get them to see this moment through a biblical lens is quite difficult. And I know, and I can only ascribe it to supernatural forces. So when you say God is doing something, I think you're right. I think Satan's doing something too.
Right.
And to try and deliver as many men from that, to shepherd as many men out of that as possible, because this is God's greasing the wheels, and you can see the wheels getting greasy in a lot of ways. And I don't think the end is good for those that are going in the other direction. A quick note before we continue. In my private book club, we've been working slowly through Black Sun by Nicholas Goodrick Clark, a careful study of the occult and ideological currents that shaped modern extremism and continue to echo today. Our next book will be Warrant for Genocide by Norman Cohn. If you've been listening to this conversation and wondering how phrases like the Jews became the default explanation for everything wrong with the world, this book answers that question. It traces the protocols of the Elders of Zion, a forged document claiming to reveal a secret Jewish plan for world domination, from its origins as a political fabrication in 1800s Russia through to the genocide it was used to justify. And it shows how the same document and its logic continue to circulate today, including in Christian spaces, just like Black Sun shows the fruit of the worldview it creates. If you or someone you know has started down that road, this book is essential reading. The goal of the book club isn't hot takes or summaries. It's slow reading, serious discussion, and the kind of formation that comes from wrestling with difficult ideas in community. If that sounds like something you'd benefit from, you can join the book club at the link below. Subscribers get access to the live sessions and can participate in the discussion in real time.
No, I agree. And I think that, that a lot of this, the transformation of the heart was what we're talking about, because it requires a transformation of the heart to move from a position of hatred to a position of love.
Yeah.
It really does. And it is, and honestly, in some ways, perhaps it has to hit rock bottom for some, but hopefully not all. For others, it's going to be, the awakening of asking the Lord to, Lord, give me your heart for this situation, for these people, and let the Lord unfold it for you. I mean, it's like you have to want to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
For this stuff to work
At all costs.
Like it really does. I mean, it's just so, the zeitgeist is not our friend most of the time. I mean, John 1 talks about the world loving darkness, and that's what we're up against. This is the world. And, there's a lot of Christians or people identify as Christians who are pushing this ideology. And it's, like I said, to me, it's no different than the priests who advocated 40 days of prayer for abortion is as destructive. Because, the women who abort their children are often end up in very a lot of self-loathing, a
Yeah.
lot of self-destructive behavior because of what they did. And the devil wants nothing more than to see humanity destroyed. And
Mm-hmm.
he's a thief and a liar, and he works at it really hard. And like I said, it takes men of courage to stand up to it. And I think that's the call. I mean, it really, to the optimism point, but it's really the call to courage, because there's no courage in following on the Jew hatred chain. It's like what everybody's doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not popular. I can assure you that. I mean, I read an article just a few minutes before I talked to you. There's this guy, Lou Engle, he's a big kind of prayer evangelist guy. He can fill stadiums typically, does these big worship events and is known for filling stadiums. And he put out a call to fast and pray on the issue of anti-Semitism. And it happened over the last weekend. It was on, it culminated in 222. That was his big thing. Let's see. I talked to him in December or maybe late November and said, this is a real issue. I need your help on this. And this was kind of his kind of piece of it. And he said, he was disappointed that he got, 500 people to show up, 600 people to show up. And, cause it's not the popular thing, but, it takes courage to do it though. It takes courage, but the harvest is plentiful, workers are few. It's always been the case, going to be the case. But, I don't know about anybody else, but I need men of courage who want to stand with me in the gap in this moment, because it matters for the church, Christendom, and it matters in our relationships with the Jews. And so to me, it's the fact that it's the thing that, Candace and company are using to thwart this revival. It's also, to me, something that it's clearly demonic. And it was really interesting that I was talking to somebody who was telling me that they're Catholic and they're close with 3 or 4 exorcists within the Catholic Church, official, the exorcist of the Catholic Church kind of people. And all of them are pro-Israel. And they say that this issue is one of the it's one of the things that is is part of the anti-Israel, the Jew hatred is part of the demonic things that are used by the demons against these people who are possessed.
Wow.
And they've seen it. They're okay, weird. The thing is, to our earlier point, even if you don't believe the whole end times construction type of stuff, you really have to put your head in the sand to go there's nothing at all God is doing here.
So bearing all that in mind, I'd like to inquire more about your experiences in Israel with the Jews, because I think a lot of Americans either have never met a Jewish person or they know only of sort of more liberal Jews, right? They've never been to Israel. They've never met an Israeli Jew. In my case, I'd never met a conservative Jew until I met Yoram Hazony, who we can talk about as well. But you've spent a ton of time in Israel. Of course, you had the courage to go to that conference in Bethlehem, and you also had the courage to say, "I'm not just going to listen to what the conference members tell me about this nation that I'm in. I'm actually going to go see for myself. And not only are you going to go see for yourself, you're going to have conversations with people on both sides and go and see with your own eyes." A lot of people will talk about many nations around the world, and it's you do realize that you're an American and you can get a passport and you can just get on a plane, you can go see it. You can do that. You know what I mean? And so, since 2011, 2012 was when you went to
2012 was the first time I went. Yep.
So that's been, coming up on 14 or so years. Let's talk about some of the experiences you've had. Let's talk about Israel today. Of course, leading up to 10/7 and after. And one of the things that I took away from the study group trip is just how transformative that event was in Israel's national consciousness and its identity, because I was in Israel in 2005, and the country that I went back to in many ways looked the same, but it felt very different in some key ways.
Right.
So maybe we can help to demystify some of the things you're seeing, because I think the way that it's portrayed, Israel is portrayed by Tucker and Candace and Fuentes and plenty of others, it's almost as if this is a nation full of wicked people who are rubbing their hands and, a big gathering of Bibi Netanyahu trying to subvert the West. And it's that's not what's going on over there. Israel is a complicated country with many of its own internal challenges that look exactly like America, and so I would love to hear from you, as you spent so much time over there and you're so familiar with the Jewish people and with the nation, about some of your experiences. I'm sure my audience would love to hear that as well.
Yeah, I have done, I think I'm in I think I did my 45th, I think maybe you're my 46th trip, probably my 60 something delegation.
Wow.
And that's that's a lot. It takes, I've been there typically 4 or 5 times a year for years.
Wow.
And I would, it's very interesting over from that first time I went to, the times I go now. I've changed a lot actually over those years. I would say when I first started, honestly, I was a bit more cagey on my opinions on the matter that I was witnessing. I used to say 2 things. One is everybody's trying to sell you on their side. And this side is you're supposed to love the Jew and hate the Arab, or love the Arab and hate the Jew. And both sides are trying to sell you on that narrative. And as a Christian, you got to reject that. Really, you really do. You really have to just not let that kind of take hold. And the problem is that most organizations out there also are expecting that from you. And so you kind of have to resist that as well. And that was, I spend a bit less time on that now, because I would say, before, like I said, I went first time in 2012, let's say first 3 or 4 years, the way that I designed trips and itineraries was 2/3 people, 1/3 sites. Okay, so you would spend most of your time meeting people and talking to people, because that's the most interesting part. And we would in the early days, we would meet a lot of people in the middle. It's called moderates, right? That was just they want
endangered
peace.
species.
I know, but they were the kind of the peace activist class within Israel. And at some point, I realized, what, actually, this is not really helping me, because if you only meet people in the middle who want peace, then you're like, well, why isn't there peace? Well, it's because the only people you met want it, right? And by peace, I mean this kind of 2-state solution, or some kind of let's just work it out, and kind of avoid the things that are very much complicated and the cause of the division. And so then I shifted to what I would call, what I call and still do, the banks of the river. Okay. And I will take you to what I can, the people on the most extreme on any side of any issue that I can introduce you to, for the purpose of letting you see, oh, this is a real mess. The people are actually really far apart from each other, and it's not easy, because these are mutually exclusive opinions. I would oftentimes, on several occasions, I would say probably from let's say 2020 through 24, or 23, really, actually 2020 through 23, I met with at least 5 Hamas members. with a delegation, because I could say, listen, Hamas wants to kill Jews, or I could just introduce you to the guy who will say it himself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was way more helpful for me to introduce you to the guy who will just say it. I mean, I sat on a rooftop with the co-founder of Hamas for about 3 hours one trip, just because that was the guy we had a chance to talk to.
Wow. Okay.
And he was terrible. He was so smooth, man. That guy was so, like, you kind of had to read between the lines just to kind of know how evil was the evil that was there, because he was just like, so, it wasn't like nice. It was like, yeah, people come up to me and I love Christians, but I get invited to their weddings. Now, if you don't understand Arab culture and like the whole like intimidation factors involved, be like, oh, it's amazing. This guy's a real peace lover. In reality, it's like a mob. Like, if you don't do this, it's manipulative, I guess is the way to say it. So over the years, it's like that has changed a lot. But the last, I would say, 5 or 6 trips that I've done, particularly after the war, in the October 7th war, there's a couple of things that changed on the ground, changed dramatically. One is all the stuff that I was doing in let's call it the reconciliation front, because in my bio, I did reconciliation initiatives all over the world. I was in Belfast. I was all over the Balkans. I did it in Nigeria. I did it in Taiwan. I've done reconciliation initiatives everywhere. And so I'm a big fan of it. I think the Holy Spirit shows up and does cool things when you bring people together that aren't normally together, that potentially hate each other, and you let Jesus show up and something happens. Mm-hmm. That I love. And the problem was, after October 7th, we went from a low trust environment to what I would call a no trust environment.
Yeah.
Okay. And I taught at a reconciliation conference last March, in Spain. And I was, I think it was in Spain. And I was, in preparation for that, I was asked to speak on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and reconciliation stuff there. I interviewed marriage counselors and asked the question, what do you advise for a couple where trust has been broken through violence? What do you do? And they said, all the secular ones say divorce is the only option. A few of the Christian ones said, yeah, it's really hard. It's almost impossible, but requires 4 things to happen. Separation, an admission of wrongdoing, things put in place so that it won't happen again, and time. Okay. We really don't have any of those. Separation, maybe, is really the only one we got. It's like, it's so bad. It's like, and so I'm like, okay, well, that's not really on the table. It's not an option. So let me do what I can. Like, there is another front of reconciliation that needs to happen, and that is between Christians and Jews, because most Christians don't know any Jews. And if they do know Jews, they know progressive Jews, and they fight over politics. And it's a quick step from a fight over politics to them Jews.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I was hanging out with a Reformed rabbi in outside of Atlanta a few years back.
From Judaism.
Yeah. And he was really liberal, progressive, whatever. And the local school district had adopted had done a resolution on anti-Semitism, but he didn't like it. And so he was attacking them for their resolution. I don't know why. It was like, probably had something to do with Israel, or it was like he was like he was a liberal guy, and the school district was super conservative, and he was like, those white Christian men, da, 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 those white Christian men, da, da, da. Like he would go off, and like as he was telling me this story, he was going off on the white Christian men. And I was like, dude, first of all, I'm a white Christian man. And second of all,
you do see me,
like,
right?
right. And so, but like you went about this the wrong way. If you didn't like it, it's like you need help from people like me.
Yeah.
To help you understand what you're running into, because what this is not helpful. But I can imagine if those white Christian men on the school board were like, why is this really liberal Jew always like up my butt on this stuff? And then it doesn't take much because the rut is deep.
Yeah.
Them Jews.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so that is, so there's a lot of that. And so one of my big goals was basically, let me just introduce you to my Jewish friends who think like you, meaning like what stereotyping is built on a belief that you meet one kind of person from that group. And then you say that whole, like, this person represents that group. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's why I was a racist from like when I was 12 to when I was in my 20s, was because I had one encounter with black people. It was terrible. And therefore I projected onto all black people were like that. Mm-hmm. A stereotyping. Okay. That's what happens with Jews. Okay. Like you have one encounter, and maybe your landlord's a jerk, and he's also Hasidic, wears a black hat, does all the stuff, but he won't give you heat, or he won't fix your hot water, or he's a jerk. And therefore, like, oh, that's how the Jews are. I mean, that's that's the experience in in Crown Heights. A lot of people I've talked to, that kind of stuff. Okay. And so a big part of my job to this day is like, let me just introduce you to my friends, my Jewish friends, who are also against abortion and porn and same-sex marriage and the list goes on. And so and are expecting with great expectance Mashiach, the Messiah, to come. Mm-hmm. And they're so excited. I was hanging out with a friend a couple years ago. He was actually speaking at a conference, and he said my kids called me today, and they said, Abba, like, when are you coming home? Like, you know, you gotta come. Like, what if you're gone when Mashiach comes? Which is a really beautiful picture. The kids are like, Dad, like, what if you're not here when Messiah comes? That to me is like, I'm like, okay, that I can work with. Let me introduce you to my Christian friends, because we're also kind of like that. Like, Will, when's Jesus coming back, man? Mm-hmm. Are you excited? I'm so excited. I cannot wait. It's going to be so great. Like that kind of like excitement. And in Israel, it's like that these days. Mm-hmm. They're just like, they're so ready. I mean, the number of conversations I've had over the last 3 years about where somebody who's a super normie who would never like talk this way to me says, Luke, we're in the age of Mashiach. I know it. I know we're in the age of Mashiach. And to me, I'm like, wow, it's so cool, because I'm of the mind that Mashiach will come too, right? Like, mm-hmm. I believe the Messiah is coming back. And, you know, the question will be like, you know, the Jews are standing next to me, and we both see, you know, I think we'll see, you know, I think we'll see Jesus. I think they'll see Jesus, because I think it's the same one.
Yeah.
So I'm of the mind that, like, I can work with that, right? So the reconciliation, I can't do much between Israelis and Palestinians, because they're just like, we're still in the no trust zone. Mm-hmm. And it's going to take some time before we move past that. And
Mhm.
when it happens, I'm all in for it. I love it. I live for it. It really is amazing. I think that I've seen when the Holy Spirit shows up in the midst of reconciliation, it's beautiful.
Mhm.
But we're not there. But what I can do is be an agent of reconciliation between Christians and Jews, because pretty much tried to kill them for most of the last 2,000 years.
Yeah.
And there's a whole group of people, it seems, uh, wanting to do that again. So
Mhm.
I can stand in the gap and be the guy that says they're not like, you're the, the Jewish rabbi that Mamdani brought on to be his Jewish outreach, who is a transgender Jewish progressive person, does not represent Jews in Israel in most of the, like, there's there's a lot of conservative Jews in Israel who are as committed to the Bible and the principles of the Bible, and are as bothered by um the wickedness of sin as you are. And let me introduce you to them. And so that's the trips that I'm running now. And they're also, mind you, utterly devoid of victimhood. Like
Mhm.
we are not going, there's no, we don't go to places of victimhood. When we go down to the border with the Gaza envelope, we're not talking about we're talking about heroes.
Mhm.
People who ran to the roar, okay, who ran to the fight. Like, I organized the event on the mall for the 1 year anniversary of October 7th. I organized the event on the mall in Washington, D.C.
Mm.
And I told all the everybody who joined me, I said, we're going to talk about heroes. That's who we're celebrating. We are commemorating the people who died, but we're going to talk about the heroes because it matters. Like, your tone on this whole subject matters in life, and
Yeah.
particularly these days, it matters a lot. And so by talking about the heroes, it's totally different spirit, for one thing, and it's in a different position, but it's also it's like shows like they're strong. There's like this guy who um his girlfriend was at Nova, so he drove down and was able to get to his girlfriend and everybody else around her, picked up a bunch of people, loaded his car, drove out, dropped off his girlfriend and everybody else, drove back in, picked up another carload, drove them out, drove back in, picked up another carload. On the way out, they got killed.
Mhm.
That's a hero. That
Yeah.
guy, that balls, right? Like, that's a man.
Mhm.
Like, that's like that to me is exemplifies the kind of men that I want to find out there, who are men of courage, who are strong and not weak,
Yeah.
who want something better out of their lives. And that the what's going to be amazing, honestly, is the generation that comes out of this last 3 years
In
is going to
Israel.
be the most incredible generation of Israel's in Israel's existence, perhaps,
I agree.
because it is loaded with men of courage. I mean, and the cool thing is, for they wore two patches. Like on a lot of the fighter guys wore two patches. One was actually banned and the other was not. One
Hmm.
was the patch for Messiah. Let's see if I have it here. If I got one. No, wait, I can't find it.
Hmm.
One was a patch which is basically a crown, like, and it's for the Mashiach, for the Messiah. It's the symbol of the Messiah.
Mhm.
And the other, more controversial,
Hmm.
is the symbol of the third temple.
Sure.
So, like, but like, man, that's what they're fighting for, right? Like, so it's this very biblical vision. Even if, like, forget the, all the New Testament stuff about whether it'll be a third temple or not. I don't know. Whatever, it'll work out. But nonetheless, there was a temple before, and it's like might be another one in the future. Who knows? But it's like this. They're rooted in this biblical narrative, nonetheless, and that's what they're fighting for, and that's what I would expect and want of the men around me to fight for. We went to the Mechina, which is this pre-military academy, and you walk in, there's 200 dudes, not weak dudes, but strong dudes, all reading the Bible, and they're arguing back and forth about some biblical text. And you're like, man, this is so cool. And they're doing it like 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
That's like, we got guys doing that? I don't know. I'm sure somewhere, but not very often. And then we, you go to the Shabbat dinner and there's like big families. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, okay. So they haven't forsaken the first command of God to humanity, which is be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it.
Right.
They haven't forsaken Abraham. They're in the land. Okay. They haven't forsaken Moses because they're Jews, and I don't think they're freed from that obligation. Now they don't know Jesus, which is unfortunate and sad to me. But, I think my duty is to represent him well, to represent Jesus well, and to be an agent of reconciliation between Jews and Christians, and let God work out the details.
Amen. I think that's a beautiful mission and a needed one, because there's been so much misunderstanding going in both directions and with different consequences and outcomes. Some worse than others. Some are political disputes, like, oh, those Jews, and some are, the Jews ritually sacrificed our son, by pushing him down a well or whatever, and now we need to do a pogrom, right? And so, and all from there. And so the need for reconciliation is great, and I appreciate that you highlighted. And I hadn't framed it in these terms to myself, but on the study group trip, there was no victimhood. That I didn't, and until you just said that, I didn't notice the lack of it. You know what I mean? Which is a good thing, right? Right. It was that there was never that spirit, and that was something that when I was growing up was a big part of my experience being Jewish, was sort of an enforced victimhood, which I rejected. I rejected that, and especially later, I never adopted it, and then I explicitly rejected it later. Like, no, that's not who I am as a man. I get the choice to be someone else. I don't have to be a victim. I refuse to be a victim because it's debilitating. And so I appreciated when I went on the Birthright Israel trip in 2007, there wasn't we did go to Yad Vashem. I remember that. But there wasn't so much victimhood, but it was in the air in its own kind of subtle way. Like, they couldn't not do it. But now going to Israel, and again, it was a slice of it. I didn't feel any of that. What I felt was a nation that was ready to be in command of its own destiny and standing on biblical foundations and saying, this is the direction we are going to go. And we now have our land in a way that we didn't before. And now we are going to take possession of our land. We have biblical warrant for it out of Scripture. And so, no, this is ours, and this is the direction that we're going to go, with a real strong sense of nationalistic self-determination and a strong masculine core. You mentioned the Mahina, right? And then I think also of the and I would like to interview these men on the podcast. Also, the guy the man in Golan, right? The former soldier in Golan, and the man with the vineyard in Judea and Samaria. And you look at, and you mentioned the big families. And then also I was surprised to learn that even most liberal Jews will go spend Shabbat with their parents. Right. It doesn't, on Friday night, everything still shuts down and people still go back. Even if they're liberals, are still going back to have and how many people in America can say they do the same? And I think the thing that was so striking for me, and I've been trying to figure out how I want to portray or how to portray this, is that a lot of the things that American men are looking for, Israeli men have. Right? It's like you're talking about being this, based and masculine dude. It's like, well, why don't you go up to Golan and talk to the retired soldier up there with his family, so cool. Right? Or you talk to the tank commander who runs the Machinal, right? Or the soldiers on the base in the Gaza envelope. Like, is that not what you're looking for? Right. And then I think also of being at NatCon, and I think I've told the story on the podcast. I was invited, because I grew up Jewish, I was invited into a room where a bunch of the rabbis, a bunch of the Orthodox Jewish men were meeting at NatCon, having lunch. And I got to sit in and listen to a Torah study. Right? They were praying and they were singing from their prayer books. And the Torah study was about, we need to bring back a moral responsibility to America. These are rabbis, big black hat, beard, the whole nine. And they're talking about returning moral character to the United States and their role in doing that. And I wish I could bring some of these base dudes or whatever into those rooms and say, you have this impression of Jews that you formed, I don't know, from reading the protocols or watching some amateur documentaries on the internet or whatever, or some clips that you saw on 4chan, whatever. Right? Absolutely. Sure. Those people did say those things. But if that's the total picture that you have, like, there's more to this picture and you can go see it for yourself. Right. But I find, and I appreciate you leading people on those trips, because I think it takes a person of real courage to say, this is my worldview. I believe this. And if I were to tell you, you can go validate or invalidate your worldview with a plane ticket, here's the ticket. Would you go? If you wouldn't go, you're a coward. Period. And so people should, I think every man who wants to stand up and say that he believes X, Y, or Z should put his worldview to the test and attempt to falsify it. And if it can fail, let it fail and find something true. And so I appreciate you putting forth real work to challenge people's presuppositions about Israel, about the Jews, and about Christians as well, from the Jewish perspective also.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that's one of the features, and it's actually not just, the Zoomers that have had this kind of rootlessness. It's actually, I think, the millennials, that was a big feature of the aughts and the early mid what do we call the 2010 decade? I don't know.
The aughts, but I think it's what the Audis.
No, the aughts I think was the zeros. So 2000.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, whatever. My point is, there was a bunch of, the number of millennials that read Wendell Berry and Front Porch Republic and were talking about localism and all these things back in the day, like the stuff that, like, to the rootedness point, the most rooted place on the planet is Jerusalem, Zion. It's where God showed up on this earth physically. Yeah. In both in the Old and the New Testament physically. And so to me, if you're hungry for the root, if you want to tap into that root, like, that's where you find it. That's where I found it. The Bible came to life for me. I talk about everybody who works with me, and everybody's been on a trip with me. Here's me talk about matters, right? Like, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. It's John 3:16, right? So God sent his Son. Like, it wasn't enough. Like, it's not just in our heads. It's not a rationalist. We don't believe in a rationalist religion. We believe in an incarnational religion, which means it's got a physicalness to it at the core, both with using a people to bring about that, not only the law, what the expectation is, but then the person who can complete the story. Like both of that is physical.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're stuck in your head, the problem is like, I don't know, maybe like it still happens to me, I'm laying in bed and like stuff that I've done, even like stuff that I've done 10 years ago will pop into my head and I would spin and spin and spin and spin. And
Yeah.
there's a verse like I figured out a way to take care of it, and I'll pass this truth on because it's in the Bible. Take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. So when that happens, that's what I do. It's like, Lord, I can't deal with this anymore. But if you're a dude and you're just like got stuff that you've done that you hate, that you don't like, you're looking for something, and you got thoughts, just don't get out of your head. Like, get rooted. And again, this place where there's a place on this earth where you can go and stand in the place where, the root of Jesse, or not the root of Jesse, but like the offspring of Jesse comes out of. It's a place you can go there,
yeah,
and let it transform you, and it's like see it, and you'll see people who have it in part, but not in full.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you go as a Christian, you'll see in full.
Mm-hmm.
And that's cool to me. And it's a cool place. And it's fun too. I mean, we have a good time. It's not just boring. I'm allergic to boring.
Yeah, no, I didn't find the trip boring at all. I found it fascinating and really engaging. I think a friend described it to me as a college course crammed into 7 days. And that was the mindset that I went in. Like, okay, I'm going there for an education.
Yeah.
And, having the opportunity to see with my own eyes. I can ask questions. I can see the man at the Nova Festival. I can't recall his name, who evacuated hundreds of people from the festival, right? You can see the burned and twisted and shot up cars. Right. And you can talk to, this leader and this, entrepreneur or this, whatever. It's like, what is this nation? Like, let me go there for myself and free reign to ask whatever question you want. No, don't hold back. I asked I want to ask a real question. You know what I mean? Right. And I think it's important to, right. And like, if they can answer it or no, but I got some great answers. Asking very, very, very difficult questions. And I think everyone should have the courage to do that, to go like whatever their worldview is. Right. And I think that's where real reconciliation comes from. Like, can we have an open conversation in the sunlight about hard things?
Right.
We don't have to resolve it, but can we have the conversation in the sunlight? And am I willing to be wrong?
Right.
And I think,
go ahead. I mean, and I would say there's a difference between going to Israel and going to Costa Rica.
I think so.
Right. Basically, especially I would say for the Christian.
Oh,
like Israel's in my Bible. And that's, one of the challenges that is, I kind of swing back and forth on is like, how much do I make the case for this from from a biblical direction? And the reason I do is because it's in there. And I just think it's like, Costa Rica is not in my Bible.
Yeah. I see what you mean.
I feel like it carries a different place in my thinking of the world, because again, it's the place where Jesus showed up. It's a place where, in Isaiah it talks about the nation shall go up to the mountain of the Lord and they will learn of the God of Jacob and the law will go forth from Zion. Like those verses come from a place. They're in a place and you can go to that place.
Yeah. So
it's just like, it carries a different weight to me. Like it's not that you can't find God anywhere else. But it is unique. And that to me is the attraction of it as well. Not only is it, is this issue a really hard issue to kind of swim in, but that place is also a very unique place in this earth.
Mm-hmm. It's almost the difficulty in terms of it being a mess. It's like it's almost a divinely woven knot. Like it's so complicated. Like you just can't believe that humans can make. Maybe they can, but there's something like, look, this tension is supposed to exist. Like
Right.
like we're not supposed. Everything is not going to be neat and clean and tidy and sensible. Things are connected to each other in really awkward ways. There's history and bad blood and people who are alive and people who are dead. And it's like, it's a plate of spaghetti. And there's a way in which we have to be comfortable with that tension and not just want to, well, no, I just need to unwind it at all costs. And one of the questions that I had in my mind is, I wonder if you can speak a little bit, coming from being a Southern Baptist pastor and your own transformation, how has so much work with Israel and the Jews, how has it transformed your faith as one of those white Christian men?
I think it's so much deeper, man. I would say that, I read the Bible and have read the Bible many times, and I've taught lots of passages of the Bible many times and unpacked these things and thought about these things and what I found is that when I'm talking to Jewish people, particularly like these rabbis, the people that I'm now friends with, I find it's like, I look at this can from one direction my whole life. And I've got this whole, like, I've figured it out. And then the rabbi says, well, what about, how did you see this part? And I'm like, oh, I totally didn't, like, it's not contrary at all to what I thought, but it adds an element to it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's the richness of my walk with Jesus has increased over time as I see these things unpack before me differently than I ever thought I would, or that, and I mean, I did a Bible course, a 9-month Bible course where over the course of 9 months, I basically wrote a commentary on the Bible. I read every book slowly, read every book looking at figures of speech and what is an application and interpretation and all these things. And years later, when I went back and looked at what I wrote, I was like, man, I can't believe I thought that.
Sure,
like,
of course.
Because I wrote it when I was younger. And after having taught some of this stuff and unpacked it further and thought about it more and thought, like, I just saw it differently. And it becomes deeper and more well-rounded and more thoughtful. And so that's how I would say that my walk with the Lord has become as a result of this, because I know what it looks like to stand on the shore of the Sea of Galilee.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just see these things, these things happening. I can picture it in my mind very differently than I did before. And also, like, it becomes not just in my head. And the thing that's like, oh, well, like that where I really think the thing I drive home a lot, anybody will go with me, is like how much the physical matters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we got to take the physical seriously. Like, it is important. The physical parts of our faith are important to God,
Mm-hmm.
which means that we got to then do things that kind of inculcate that into our walk.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's become deeper. And I don't know, man, it's just become, I don't know. I love it. I love going. I love seeing people. I love watching people go, oh, wow. Wow. Like, I didn't think it was going to be like that. I didn't think it was going to be that small. I didn't think that it was going to look like that. And I just love it. I love Jesus a lot. and I love bringing people to the land where he walked. I think I think it's special, and it's easy to do. It's
Mm-hmm.
you can get in a plane and go on the other side of the world and walk around and eat good food and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just really cool. I don't know. But it's changed my life for sure.
Yeah, same. I appreciate hearing your own stories of sanctification, because this was a big one for me. Certainly my own relationship with Jews and Judaism, that was something I had to go through publicly, and that's part of it. Certainly
Yep.
there's for especially for someone with a microphone and a camera, like I think there's public sanctification is part of the deal. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm grateful to the Lord for leading me through it, and for leading me to Israel to breathe in this new place than where I was 21
Right.
years ago, to breathe the air and to look at the street signs and to see the construction of cities, like these things that we take for granted, the architecture of the United States, or the construction of a mall, or what the cars look like, these things that we take for granted. When you go to a country like that and you see it's totally different, it's, of course, many of the shapes and forms are the same, but the little details that make a nation what it is are so totally different. And then you realize, like, oh, I'm not in Kansas anymore, or
Right.
Arizona, or whatever. And it just, to encounter the matter, and to encounter the people, and to walk in the place where Jesus walked, and to visit, the places that were the neighborhood he grew up in, to drive, up to the Sea of Galilee and to see the topography of it. Like, did Jesus walk in these hills when he was a teenage boy? I don't know, maybe, like this was where he grew up. This was
Right.
was the area, right? Or to see the places where he taught, or where David, his city, and that it's just like it grounds the Bible and the story in this way that it takes it, as you said, out of the realm of the rational and makes it visceral. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I am part of this, in a
Right.
way. And how can that not transform your faith?
Right. And to you, it, like, as a Jewish person, it it's you have a different connection to it
True.
than I do, who is
Mm.
not. I'm not Jewish. I know the beard makes me look that way. Told the curly hair. Some of my haters call me a crypto Jew. That I'm not actually a Christian. I'm just pretending.
Let's see the nose.
I'm terrible at pretending, if that's the case.
Yeah.
But it's I it's a very, I don't know how I want to say this. It's, seeing, like, even being there with you
Hmm.
was actually unique. One, because I've told this story a couple of times, is that there's the area of where there's a lot of tension is between the Jews that believe Jesus is Messiah and those that don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Is one of the, and it has and is in many ways still the third rail of the work I do, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
people are like very reluctant to kind of talk about that issue. And your trip was the first one where I asked the organizers, Orthodox, and I said, do you know that Will was Messianic? And they said, yeah. I'm like, okay. I mean, that I have never seen before. Seriously. 45 times 70 trips or 65. Oh, I lost count on that part. Like, delegations. And I've never seen okay, like, listen, we got to pick our battles, and this is not the battle we want to pick. That is a new day, dude. Like, I can't tell you, like, that is like, it goes from when I started this work, most, like, rabbis were not interested in talking to me. And then over time I became, kosher, and then lots of rabbis would talk to me. And then after October 7th, the fact that every other ally of the Jewish people forsook them except for the evangelicals, and it was like, okay, we're in a new day.
Mm-hmm.
And that last month, that never happened before. And it's, it is, And I just did a conference last week. That had a lot of Orthodox and Messianics at it. And it was uncomfortable for them both, actually. Well, more for the Orthodox than the Messianics. But nonetheless, it was like, okay, like we're here for it. Like it's like it's not in that there's like this great, so we're on the, it's this glorious relationship. But to move from where we were even last year to now, it's like I've never seen it like this. I really haven't.
Well, praise God.
Yeah.
I agree. Thank you for telling me that. I didn't really think about it. I walked away. I walked away with such a deep love for the people that I met there, because they helped me have an experience of being Jewish that I had literally never seen growing up. Again, I told Yoram Hazoni, like when he and I met at NatCon, or probably it was on the podcast, I told him that we did the first time before I actually went out to DC. Like, you're the first conservative Jew that I've ever met.
Right.
I haven't met one, in all my life, not growing up, not in college. Right. And then to go over to Israel and to meet so many of them, right. and conservative politically, conservative in terms of like believing very much and living out traditional values, and then committed to a form of orthodoxy, not ultra orthodoxy. That's the hat and the black. Right. That's a separate thing, related but separate. Right. Like committed to a form of what we might call religious orthodoxy. Like, this is not just something that, like, it's not just my political beliefs. It's not just my socio-cultural beliefs. These are my religious beliefs. Like, I live this. I eat and breathe. This is in my bones and my blood and my family. This is Yoram and many of the people that we met, and it was wonderful to see that. And it gave me such a great appreciation for so many things that were not part of my own heritage, and a real love for the people of Israel in a way that I hadn't known, because it's like, oh, okay, now I can finally see something that I see myself reflected in it. Right. I haven't always been politically conservative, quite the opposite, actually, for a while, but I was never a victim. So I couldn't identify with the way that I was being told to carry my Jewishness. Like, never. Right. I have, there's a whole story around this, but I have the words like Tikkun Olam tattooed on my left shoulder. So we can, tattoos and Jews, the whole other thing. But, that phrase means to heal the world. And there's a whole, that has a whole big meaning to it in mysticism. And we don't need to get into that. But I got that phrase tattooed, not because I knew precisely what it meant, but because I thought it was always my responsibility. If being Jewish meant one thing to me, it was that I had if I truly am one of God's chosen people, right, then I must have some responsibility towards the world. That was always how I held it. It was never, woe is me, I'm a victim. I rejected all that outright. But I didn't meet any Jews who thought that way. And so I essentially didn't know Jews, but to go and to see and to meet many Jews, many of them who share a similar belief in their ability and their calling, and what it actually means to be part of a covenant with God, gave me such a different appreciation for where I come from and who I am. And so in a way that I really hadn't before. And of course, to put the Christianity on top of that, I don't know if on top of, around, however you want to locate it in space, right, was, I don't know, it was the finishing of that. It was the go ahead.
I think I met there's a couple of guys, next time you go, I'll take you there. They had a podcast, a couple Orthodox, religious Zionist guys. They had a podcast either late in 23 or early in 24, where they're like, we trusted in America. We trusted in our IDF. We trusted in all these things, and look, it failed us. We have to trust in the Lord. And I'm like, this is the most Christian thing I've ever heard, right? Like I was like,
Yeah.
and it's that kind of thing that came that I was like something different is happening here.
Yeah.
One of the things that, and I raised this with Jews hate it when I actually raise this issue, but I think it's profound.
Yeah.
Is that the kibbutzes that fell victim to the Hamas mobs were the secular ones
on 10/7.
On 10/7, yeah, on October 7th. The ones that survived, that didn't actually have, that weren't, they didn't lose very many people or were stopped at the gates or whatever, were the religious ones. And I don't mean that as like those secular people deserved it. I don't mean that at all. And I think that's usually how it kind of, a lot of Jews take it. That's not my intent. My intent is to say, like, God is up to something, and he will use things to point to himself. Like I said in the earlier in this show, the many times where God says, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z so that the nations will know that I'm a God. Like that kind of, like, it's not like this stuff is God is up to something. He's pointing to himself, and and Israel is that thorn in the flesh of the world. You got to remember, the Romans called the Jews atheists because they wouldn't put their God in the pantheon. And then like they like the Jews just don't do what they're supposed to do. That's the, like that was, Martin Luther, who is, the Protestant reformer, early on in his, in the very, when he started the Protestant Reformation, if you will, he was very philo-Semitic. He would talked about how the Jews mistreated, or how the Catholic Church mistreated the Jews, and that, it's terrible. And like, that was his early writings. And then at the end of his life, he writes The Jews and Their Lies, which was clearly the opposite take. And I think it's because the Jews didn't do what he wanted them. He wanted them to convert. He wanted them to become Christian, and they didn't. So like one of the first anti-Christian Zionist conferences in the United States was in LaGrange, Illinois. And one of the primary members of that conference was the Billy Graham Association. Why? Because the Jews did not convert when they're supposed to. They're supposed to, like, haven't you read Isaiah 53? Right? Having, like, I think there's this, is why why there's this unique hatred, because the Jews don't do what everybody else does, but that's also part of the story. It's one of the reasons, that they stand out. And God has a purpose and a plan. He's going to continue to use them to make it not easy for the rest of the world to not see God.
I mean, that's as you said, that's how they were used to the Old Testament. That's who the revelation came through, and the world hates that. And then it was Jesus who brought that revelation, the applicability of the moral law to everybody. This is not just something for us. This is now for everybody. In fact, in family worship last night, we're reading through John, loving leading my 4-year-old daughter through the Gospel of John, by the way. Nice. And we read last night, John, I have it marked right here because we literally just read it. If I had not, this is John 16, 27. Sorry, 22. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have sinned, but now they have no excuse for their sin. He who hates me hates my Father also. Right?
Yep.
And so there it is, the applicability. So the giving of the moral law, that it's not just subjective or your God's, like God says, this is what's up. And then the applicability is now to everybody. And one of the things I've been talking to people a lot about lately is the term Judeo-Christian, and attempting to explain to them that there is some actuality behind the term. Like, yes, there's a political dimension to it, but there is actually two different halves of this. There is something that happens in the Old Testament and something different that happens in the New Testament that are deeply connected. And it's a finishing and completing and a completion of revelation. But these are still two separate things, and you can reject both, as the Nazis did, both Christianity and Judaism for totally separate reasons. And so there is an applicability of this term. So there's a way in which people want to overlook what actually happened in the Old Testament, so full of names and places and things that don't make any sense to us. Like, just give it to me. So it turns out, in my enthusiasm for what I was just saying, I accidentally hit the space bar and muted myself. I don't know what I was saying. It was probably clearly God was at work and people didn't need to hear it anyway. I was saying, if you're a Christian, read the Old Testament, be blessed by what you read there, embrace it, even though it's unfamiliar, and then travel to Israel and you can see the places where these stories took place for yourself. And I think those are good things for Christians to do.
Oh, 100%. But it's also, there's this great book by the guy by Os Guinness about how the reading of the book, the Hebrew Bible, changed the world. And Os Guinness is from the Guinness beer family. Guinness, a great guy, wrote some amazing books. But he talks about in there how without the Gutenberg press putting the whole Bible into the hands of the average person, that you then end up with the political philosophies that formed the political philosophies of, Locke and Hume and none of the other names are coming to mind, but lots of them, right? Kant. These guys that were Mills and et cetera, all because the Bible the whole Bible got into the hands of the people. Mm-hmm. And it is because the Old Testament particularly is the nation building part of the Bible. The New Testament has basically two sections where anything, or three maybe, about kind of politics, right? Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. Render unto God that which is God, says Jesus, and taxes. Then you have Romans 13, the nation, government does not bear the sword in vain. And then you have 1 Peter 2 that says, basically the role of government is to punish evil and affirm what is good. That's it. Mm-hmm. Everything else is really about relationship with God and relationship with other people. Mm-hmm. And whereas if you like the nation building part, how do we organize ourselves and things like that, comes out of the Hebrew part of the Bible. Mm-hmm. And so to me, the Judeo-Christian is that, right? It's that combination of the nation building part, because if you didn't have it, you wouldn't know how to build a nation according to the way God lays it out. And then the interpersonal relationships that are then come out of that. You've formed a nation. What is that social contract you have with each other? Mm-hmm. So to me, it is unpopular these days to use Judeo-Christian, but I think it really kind of exemplifies that understanding of. I mean, you can have one without the other. You can have the nation building part. I mean, the modern state of Israel is that. Or you can have the New Testament, but then you get some, I think that's where you get kind of some of this like toxic empathy kind of stuff, and don't know how to deal with the violence of the state and whatever, the Anabaptist stuff. Mm-hmm. But it goes together when you get the Judeo and the Christian. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think there's a rejection now of Judeo-Christian because Jews are framed as a uniquely corrosive force in American life and culture. And so we need to excise the Judeo from the Christian, right? And just say we're just Christian. And, accept it. Like, if you just accept that frame, don't accept that frame. But if you do, sure, I suppose that makes sense. But if you want to actually talk about something that's true, we'll say nationalistically, legally, politically, absolutely. If we talk about what's true theologically, you have to understand that these are two separate groups, two separate phases of revelation. Of course, they're deeply interrelated, right? They're deeply connected to each other, and one completes and finishes the totality of God's revelation. Absolutely. And it's two different groups of people almost, right? Well, in a sense, like it's to one group of people what's actually like revealed to during the time of the writing. But yeah, I think the rejection, the attempt to throw out all things Judeo as corrupt, evil, wicked, universally, to broad brush paint it and toss it, it ignores the fact that Israel is struggling with some of the same aspects of liberalism that America is. Right. Yeah. There's a religious, traditional, orthodox, component of Israel that agrees with none of this stuff. They want it to go away as well. And to attempt, and that's like, can you see some commonality there? Is this some grand Jewish conspiracy to subvert their own nation? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, and that part of my problem with some of these guys is, I mean, heck, if any of these guys, instead of just saying the Jews, said progressives, I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm there with you. Or even progressive Jews, I'd be like, okay, yeah, but that means there's others, but that's not how they talk, So it is the like stereotyping thing that just is, to me, it's such a low IQ thing. Can't deal.
Yeah. I say, leave the meme class and join the reading class, and then if you're so inclined, leave the reading class and join the traveling class. This has been a real blessing of a conversation to me. I pray it has been for the audience as well. I think it will be. I guess we've covered so much ground. I just want to offer you the chance, if you have some final thoughts to some of the men who might be listening, maybe some of the men whose consciences might be pricked a little bit by some of the things we've said, or people who are curious, like, what advice would you want to give them? Because obviously these sets of topics, everything is so heated, so toxic, contentious, divisive, all these different things. And I think it's a time where individuals should feel genuinely called to depart from their own particular tribe if God calls them to. Can you issue that call somehow? Like, hey, if you're following Christ, this may be the direction you have to go.
Yeah. I mean, I want, like, I don't want to sound like Jesus too much, but literally come and follow me. I fight this stuff all the time. And when you see it, when you get on my side of this and you see what's before us, and you have the opportunity to actually to get in the trenches and fight the fight, you see it in a different way. I bring people to events where I will put you on the ground with a bunch of groypers and you got to take them on. Mm-hmm. That teaches you something. Like, enough of the, to your point, get out of meme world. I mean, I'm a firm believer. I spent most of the last 2 years doing counter rallies, counter demonstration, my own rallies, my own demonstrations. When you're standing, you and 10 other people, against 250 people waving flags and yelling at you, you begin to see you see things more clearly. Mm-hmm. But you also feel like, no, I'm on the right side of history here. This is God is with me on this. And so my call for men is to be men of courage and to model the whole of the revelation that Jesus gives us in the Bible, to live in the opposite spirit. And like where Jesus literally says, love your enemies. That is not squishy and soft. That is courageous. That takes courage to do that. And that's what Jesus calls us to do. Islam calls you to come and die for Allah. The pagans ask you when you're going to have your next orgasm. Jesus says, come and take up your cross and follow me. And that's work. And it takes courage to do that. And so that's the call to, I think, is to men. Let's lead on this because it is important. And I ask God to show you how. But if you want to do it really on the ground, come do it with me because it's fun.
Highly recommended. My seal of approval. Thank you so much, Luke. Again, this has been wonderful. I'm so grateful for your wisdom and for your thoughtfulness and your godliness, and also for your friendship and for your time today to share all of that with my listeners. If you'd like to, where would you like to send people to find out more about you and what you do and how to jump on a trip with you?
Well, probably the easiest spot is my website for the just general, get around Luke Moon is Luke, my email, luke@twohammers.com. You can go to my website, twohammers.com. It's named after Judas the Hammer Maccabeus and Charles the Hammer Martel, two men who stood against the hordes, one the Greeks and the other the Muslims, and they won in both rounds. So that's what we got to do. There's a fight before us, and so I need men who want to join me, and women too. I guess you can come too, but I'm really want the men to come. So that's that. Yeah, that's where Luke at twohammers.com or just twohammers.com. You'll find me there too.
Wonderful. I'll send everyone your way. Thank you so much again, Luke. I'm very blessed by this conversation.
Me too. I'm glad you invited me.